Hello and welcome to the longest video I've ever done. I have absolutely no doubt that this is going to end up being monstrously long. I'm not even going to bother explaining. It says the concept in the title. I'm going to rank every episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, starting from the very beginning, getting to the very end. I have got a bit of a cold right now, but I wanted to do this as soon as possible because I have just watched the show over the course of about 2 weeks and properly binged it. So starting with Welcome to the Hellmouth and The Harvest, I'm going to put that in great. I think it's really, really strong first 2 episodes for the show. All the characters are set up really, really well. Brilliant casting for choices for all of them. It sets up the whole high school as a literal Hellmouth concept. We get vampires. It feels very strange to watch it with the context of the rest of the show because it is such a different tone and feel from the music to the direction. Everything feels very different to what came afterwards. But it's just a genuinely really, really strong start to the show. We get Giles, we get the Watch Council, and the whole idea of the show is all really condensed to a very succinct first 2 parts. It's a bit clunky, possibly, but I really love that you can see where the vision from this eventually evolved into the rest of the show. The Witch is decent. It's a nice little episode. It's a bit baffling to a British person because cheerleading as a cool thing to do, it seems incredibly strange. But it's just a nice little fun episode. It introduces us to the character of Amy, who's personally just one of my favorite little random side characters that pops up a few times. It's very funny. It's got a lot of good humor, and the cat jump scare remains the scariest Buffy moment for me. I actually jumped out of my skin when that cat jumped out of the box, which seems weird, but it's just generally really unsettling. And it just sort of introduces all the concepts really, really nicely. It's a nice little 45-minute compact piece of television that I think works really, really well. On the other hand, Teacher's Pet is outright bad. It's one of those. Actually, maybe it's just putting not a fan. Yeah, I think. No, I'll chuck it an outright bad. I don't really like this episode very much. Early Xander is. I enjoy him for the humor, but he's a bit difficult at times. I think this is a lot of those early problems rolled into it. The teacher-student romance thing is very unsettling. I'm not really sure what this episode is trying to say, other than teacher-student romances are bad. And the praying mantis effect doesn't really bother me. I'm a classic Doctor Who fan. Dodgy effects are just part of the course, but the whole story is not particularly great. And there is this actually interesting concept when Angel coming to tell Buffy about this vampire who displeased the master, so he cut his hand off and he's got this sort of fork hand, and then that kind of goes nowhere because we're focusing on this as the A plot when there's a much more interesting story to be told. So for that reason, I think, I just don't really get on board with this episode. Never Kill a Boy on the First Date is, to me, one of the most underrated stories in all of Buffy. I suppose I should just mention now that I'm not ranking them within their tiers because it would take me way too long. So I'm just going to chuck everything in a tier. I'm not going to say where it goes up against The Witch, for example. I think Never Kill a Boy on the First Date is a really good story. I think it gets kind of a bad reputation because people don't like the Anointed one, but I think that twist at the end is really cleverly handled. It's one of the first stories to really hone in on the Buffy social life versus Slayer life thing. It's got some great lines. I really enjoy Giles in this. He is really, really strong. And everyone's just having a lot of fun. It's got some good music and some. Yeah, I am a bit of a sucker for season 1, to be honest. I know it gets a bad reputation among fans because it's a bit cheesy and but actually I really enjoy all those elements. And I think Never Kill a Boy on the First Date is a good, solid story. The Pack is okay. Again, early Xander, this is bringing out all of his worst traits on purpose. I really enjoyed the direction and the feel of this episode with all the sort of tribal music and big, long musical scenes of people walking. But it's not a favorite story of mine. I like that this was continuously referenced throughout the rest of the show, but it's not really for me. Angel is good. Definitely among the stronger episodes of this season. Actually, hang on. I might just push that into great. I think I will. I think I'll just about push it into great. I think this is a really strong episode. The first time I was watching it, I did not guess that Angel was a vampire. I thought maybe his parents were killed by vampires, and maybe his parents were vampires. I wasn't aware at the time, obviously, that was supposed to be impossible, although I should have, because just think about it. But Angel is a really strong episode for the show. It's sort of been a bit wonky after the first two episodes, sorry. But it gives us a lot of really good stuff. We get Darla. Obviously, it's not anywhere near as focused as later stories would be on Angel's past, on Darla as a character, but it's a nice groundwork for all that later came along. And this is the same with Welcome to the Hellmouth. They are not amazing in terms of the grand lore and mythos of the show, but they set the groundwork perfectly. And I think there's a really good final battle in here between Angel and Buffy and Darla. And Darla's shocked when she sees Angel stake her. Now, when I first watched that, it didn't really mean anything. But in hindsight, that is massive. That is a huge, huge moment for Angel's character. And I really like that. And obviously they couldn't have seen where this was going to go, but I think it's a really, really strong episode. I, Robot Eugene is also okay. I am a bit of a defender of this one. I like Moloch. I think he's got a really cool design. And early Willow is my favorite version of Willow. She is so sweet and adorable. But I don't know what this episode was going for. It fakes out so many times. I appreciate that this is the first time I get to meet Jenny Calendar, who I think is a brilliant character. And her dynamic with Giles, even early on, is just absolutely electric. But why was certain elements of this plot? It feels outdated. This is the most dated episode of the show because it's just a strange. Computers are bad, I think, but then they're good because they're repositories of knowledge. But it's about online dating and things like that, and not trusting people because they could be, someone else, not who they say they are. But it just kind of makes it feel very dated, especially because there's lots of stuff on computers that look just like loads of code. It can't really hold that against it, but it's not a particularly strong story in its own right. And I think that the resolution is rushed and kind of comes out of nowhere. And Willow is a little bit out of character. There is a really great scene at the end between the three of our leads, when they talk about how they'll never have a nice, normal relationship ever. It's a melodramatic teenage thing, but it's quite a nice little scene at the end. Puppet Show was, on my original viewing, my least favorite episode of the entirety of Buffy. It's possibly one of the few that I got secondhand embarrassment for watching. I wasn't sure about watching the show to begin with. I watched it because of the Doctor Who connection, because Russell T Davies had used the Buffy blueprint for what he made Doctor Who, with the 45-minute format, the episodic with the overall story arcs, all of those things, big bads, all those words. And I enjoyed the first season a lot. I even enjoyed Teacher's Pet more on the first viewing. This is actually my second or third viewing of third time watching Buffy all the way through just this year. I didn't watch any Buffy before this year, so I'm totally new to the game. The Puppet Show, I don't like. The humor doesn't really work for me. It has a few nice moments. I like the end with Snyder and the first time getting to see Armor Shimmerman in this role, which he nails. I think he's absolutely brilliant. But I'm not really a fan of this episode. I really think that it drags its feet. Even in 45 minutes, I feel bored and I feel a little bit embarrassed. And they don't really have the budget to do the puppet concept well, I think. And again, classic Doctor Who fan here. If it looks rubbish, but the storyline is great, you can look past the rubbish. But it just looks rubbish and the storyline is rubbish. So it's rubbish on two levels. Nightmares. Incredible television. This is one of my favorites of this entire season. I think Nightmares is brilliant. I really genuinely think that it is actually maybe incredible television is too high. I've taken note of where I'm putting things. Yeah, okay, that is a little bit too high because I'm looking at the other episodes that I've not put in the incredible television category, and I'm not going to put this above something like The Zeppo or Fear Itself or Homecoming. But I think Nightmares is a brilliant episode. It's fun concept, wacky concepts. You know, all these dream sequence stuff that was later perfected in Restless, but the way that they walk through and they're in entirely different rooms. And it's like random little things like the fact that they're looking across the road and they can see the graveyard is just sitting there at the other side of the road, and it's night over there, and it's just weird little things like that that make me really enjoy this episode. Maybe the resolution is weak, and that's probably the only reason why it's not an incredible television, but I just love the concepts and how much we learn about all of our characters from this, particularly Giles and Buffy and what their nightmares are. I think that the moment when Giles sees his nightmare is an amazing moment, one of my favorites in this first series, and we understand our characters well enough, even just 10 episodes in, this episode really, really works. Out of Mind, Out of Sight is, again, decent. It's enjoyable. I got much to say about this one other than Cordelia's has been hanging around basically throughout the whole of series 1, and now she's here. And I enjoyed her throughout the whole series, but it always when I was watching it the first time, she was in the opening credits of every single episode. And I thought, well, she doesn't really seem like a main character. David Boreanaz wasn't in the main credits. Other people who seemed more integral to the show. This is the Cordelia episode, and it's when I was really sold on her character. She was more than just a parody of the school sort of bully the pampered princess. She was a really well-written character, played brilliantly by Chris Carpenter, one of my favorites in the whole Buffyverse, but that's an entirely separate video. It's a really strong episode for her. The plot itself is fine, and I think it's probably the articulation of the high school as hell concept, the fact that she's so lonely and feels like no one's noticing her, feels like she's invisible, that she actually manifests and she turns invisible. It is a decent revenge plot anyway. Yeah, I quite enjoy this one. Prophecy Girl is far and away the best episode of season 1. Genuinely amazing finale. The Master, I didn't really talk about that in the first episode, but there's been the Master sort of creeping in the background the whole way through. And that arc, him as a big bad and that arc are neither of my favorites, but this finale is amazing. I think it's got so many great moments. It feels like the episode that Buffy really grew up, not only as a show, but also as a character. The brilliant speech she gives to Giles about how she's only 16 years old. She doesn't want to die. And then there's so many just chilling moments. I was thinking about Willow when she finds the bodies and then she's in the bed. And it's almost like this fun show has kind of been dragged away from you. And she said, it wasn't our world anymore. It was theirs. They made it theirs and they had fun doing it. And obviously there's the amazing, some really just joyous moments. I think Buffy's death and the punning in the fight with the Master, but also her death, but then her being brought back. There's this look between Xander and Angel who don't like each other very much. Just absolute pure relief. I love the fact that it was Xander who got to kind of redeem himself after a series of being not useless, but sort of just hanging about a lot of the time. And he gets the big hero moment. I love the shot of the three of them walking to the Buffy music after Cordelia yells, "Who's going to help us?" or "Who's going to save us?" And bringing all these ideas throughout the series, because obviously we've picked up people along the way. We picked up Jenny, we've picked up Cordelia. I would have quite liked Amy to be here as well, but everyone being in the library fighting as the Hellmouth is opened. It feels like if they'd ended the show here, because they didn't know they were going to get more than one season, they would have wrapped everything up really well. The arc, the individual character arcs, they've wrapped everything up, but there's still potential for more storytelling here. And that is the basic principle of this story. I think this becomes the blueprint for what they want the rest of the show to be. It's big, it's epic, but it's still every bit as funny and quirky as other stories, have been. When She Was Bad, great. Again, there's going to be a lot in this column, I think. It's a really nice epilogue to season 1. When I first watched it, I couldn't really take it into account because I spent the whole time going, "Oh, are they going to resurrect the Master?" Because that just feels like weak. We had him last series, we finished that, do something else. But in hindsight, it's actually a really good epilogue for that season and for Buffy's trauma from dying. I think there's a lot of iconic moments peppered all throughout the story. And it's just a really, really good story. The Anointed One is pulling some stuff behind the strings. I don't really like the Anointed One as a character, but it wouldn't have made sense to just totally drop him and to go straight into vampires were a religious cult, but now they're crazy punk rockers. We needed School Hard to really get us there. And When She Was Bad is a very fun story, and it has some great moments. I love Buffy smashing the bones of the Master into essentially talcum powder at the end. I think it's a really, really great final moment. It's a brilliant beginning to a season. I think this is the best season opener in the Buffyverse. Buffy and Angel, this is my favorite season opener. I think probably without question. Some assembly required. I feel like another one that probably gets slagged off. I think it's decent. I think it's fine. It's a hapless little Frankenstein prestige with some interesting ideas, maybe not fully realized, but some interesting ideas and some good performances, some nice funny moments, and Jenny and Giles just being absolutely adorable throughout the whole thing. I don't have much to say about it, but it's very, very good. School Hard is incredible. I would also say it's the most important episode of Buffy, because in season 1, the vampires were kind of this religious cult, there's prayers, there's rituals, and then Spike and Drusilla come along and totally tear up the rule book and change everything. And they kill the Anointed One at the end of the episode. From now on, there's going to be a bit less ritual and a bit more fun. And it changes the entire show. James Masters and Juliet Landau both play their roles perfectly, and Juliet Landau is so good as Drusilla that I can overlook the not amazing British accent. James Masters' accent is fine. For the most part, I'm not a fan of when Buffy has non-English actors playing English roles, because it's not an easy accent to master, apparently. It seems easy, but the Americans don't really seem to get it, other than Alexis Denisov, who has an impeccable accent. But it's just a brilliant siege story in the school. Lots of funny moments, lots of great iconic moments, the smashing through the windows. It's a brilliant story, and it's the Prometheus basically for what Buffy would become. I said Prophecy Girl was the blueprint, but School Hard is kind of ripping up the rule book, and this is the new rules. Anything goes. Our villains are very funny. We're in carnage mode. Inca Mummy Girl is okay. I don't mind it. It gets a really bad reputation. It has 2 brilliant songs from 4-Star Mary. It was the first appearance of Oz. The mummy story itself is fine. I don't hate it. There's actually a charm to a lot of the stories in the early years that I probably wouldn't let stories like this pass if they were later on. But because of the tone of the show was quite different, and it was quite funny, and it wasn't ever taking itself seriously. I can forgive an episode like Inca Mummy Girl. Similarly, Reptile Boy is pretty much on the same level. Buffy and Cordelia are invited to a frat party, and there's a demon, because of course there is. And they're going to be offered up as a sacrifice. There's actually some nice stuff with her and Giles sort of clashing on the whole Slayer, Watcher, her personal life versus social life issue. And there's actually some good stuff with Angel in this, which I was not a fan of Angel on Buffy, but I quite like the stuff that was done with him here. And Nicholas Brendan's comedic timing in this episode is perfect. I mean, it usually is, but I always notice it in this episode. It's a fine story, but I was just waiting to get here. Halloween is insane. I love it. It's an amazing story. It's just, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it pretty much is. The entire concept, apparently, I saw a review recently said that the concept wasn't that original, but I've never seen anything else that's done that concept. I remember watching it the first time, realizing what was going on, and just being like, this is absolutely brilliant. I think everyone is great. All the performances, all the characters, all the jokes within it land. I think it's absolutely top tier Buffy. I love Willow in this. It also gives us our next shot of Oz seeing Willow, but being just like, who is that girl? Without without seeing her, and I love her ghost costume. The bit when she walks through the wall and Giles just spills all his pages everywhere is one of my favorites. Spike is having an absolute ball. Buffy as the princess, Xander as this hyper capable army guy who's just happy to take all these directives, whilst Cordelia is just running around in a cat costume that hasn't changed her whatsoever. And it gives us Ethan Rayne, and basically Ethan Rayne equals fun episode. That is pretty much the rules, with one exception. Lie to Me is incredible. I didn't really get it on the first watch, and it's taken a few viewings. I think every time I watch it, I appreciate something about it even more. I think it's because the twist at the end is such a big twist that it recontextualizes everything you've seen up to that point. The idea of this kid who went to school with Buffy, but who was it Ford? His name's Ford. That totally went out of my head then. He went to school with Buffy, and he's now figured out that she is the Slayer, and he's figured out all about vampires. And it feels very natural that they have this episode explain and explore, and this kind of cult that worships vampires, that sees them as some sort of lonely creatures. Now, Ford doesn't think that, and the final twist that he has brain cancer, or a brain tumor. It's never actually specified what. Is a real kicker of a twist, and it recontextualizes everything, and it just makes this episode so sad. But they do obviously turn him into a vampire, and then Buffy has to stake him immediately. His plan for immortal life was not, she could never let that happen. And there's the beautiful scene at the end of Giles and Buffy walking in the graveyard, and she says, "Lie to me," and he says, all the good guys are always stout and pure. The bad guys can be told by their big horns, or whatever he says. Good always wins, and no one ever dies. And she just says, "Liar." I think it's the perfect ending to a really, really strong episode. Okay, The Dark Age. Good. Something has to go into this category eventually. Ethan Rayne. This is not a fun episode necessarily, but it's an interesting episode. I remember in Halloween kind of being like, oh no, I don't want to give Giles a dark backstory. But it's not too dark. I mean, they did some shady stuff, but they weren't evil, which is kind of where I feared that this was going. It's a really big episode for both Giles and Jenny, but also for everyone realizing that Giles was, not a saint when he was at school. He was, he was a screw up like them, and realized that where he's got Igon. Igon is a cool concept, and Ethan Rayne is abhorrent in this story. He's not just a fun villain. He is an actual threat of a villain. It's a really strong story. Not amazing, but one that I've definitely warmed to over time. What's My Line? And I think, yeah, that's probably an incredible. It's a really, really strong two-parter. I think there's a lot of maybe back in great. Oh, I don't know. There's such a fine line between these columns. I'll just chuck it there. This whole idea of Buffy realizing that her future is, she doesn't have a choice. She is the Slayer. That's it. But also the introduction of Kendra as the second Slayer. These the bounty hunters are such a fun villain that goes against this. I love the Xander and Cordelia stuff in this story. It's absolutely amazing, and I laugh my head off every single time with the kiss with the big music going. It's a really strong story. It's not as great as the other two parters. I think maybe Buffy's a little bit too dark and down in the dumps in this episode, for me to be totally, because she's maybe a little bit unnecessarily so at certain points to keep it out of the incredible column. I'm just trying to justify that opinion. Then Ted, not a fan. I would say not a fan. They gave me an idea that I could get behind, which is Buffy uses her super strength irresponsibly, and she kills someone, and she has to deal with the consequences. But then that's a fake out, because he's not a real person, and she didn't even kill him. He is a robot, so she doesn't have to deal with. It's like it gives me the consequences, and then it takes them away again, and it's just like, well, actually, no, none of that actually matters, and next week you can just get on with it. John Ritter plays it really well, but I'm just not a fan of this story. it was an interesting look at Buffy's character, but because of the way it turns out with him being a robot, it just is not remotely interesting to me, particularly when I rewatch it. Here we go. Bad Eggs, also in the Not a Fan column. This is probably the weakest story of season 6. Season 2, sorry. In my opinion. This is just dull. It just feels like, particularly after the run that we were on, where we had Halloween, Lie to Me, The Dark Age, and the 2 parts of What's My Line. This just feels like the slump after all of these big episodes. It's not particularly fun to watch. It's not got a lot of good humor, and the eggs are just boring. I don't mind the Gorges, the cowboy vampires, and it has an okay, first scene with Buffy in the mall. But after that, it's just a strangely boring episode. And Buffy wasn't boring very often because it's a very fun show. Surprise and Innocence goes into the incredible column. Could even move into best of the best, but I'm trying to leave that off so that it doesn't go totally off the rails. Surprise is a very good first part, and the sort of reveal of who Jenny really is. Spike and Drusilla, with the return of Drusilla, Buffy's prophetic dreams, the party, Oz being in this story as well, and being great in this story. He just discovers his vampires, and it's I know it's a lot to take in. He's actually, it explains a lot. Finally, someone in Sunnydale with an ounce of sense. But it's the ending, the twist at the end when Angel gets his soul back that makes Innocence a sublime episode, just top notch. The judge, the rocket launcher, but mainly the Buffy and Angel dynamic. I didn't like Angel as a character, and I thought Buffy and Angel's romance was kind of dull. I've got to be totally honest. But this is when all of that build up that he wasn't a fan of was put to total good use, because he flips from this broody, sort of melodramatic romantic to sadistic and horrible, and he smears blood of Jenny's uncle on the wall saying, "Was it good for you too?" And he taunts Buffy. And I love the rocket launcher ending. With this idea that no weapon forged can kill it. Well, this wasn't forged the last time, and it's brilliant. It's a really, really strong story. Again, it could move into best of the best, but I'm trying to limit myself on what I describe as the top column. Phases is good. The epitome of just a solid Buffy episode. It's nice to see Oz get some more screen time. It's an Oz-focused episode. It has some cheesy dialogue. I think of the werewolf in love line. But I enjoy this story, and even though the werewolf effects are unusual and a bit strange, I really like the campiness and the cheesiness and the fact that I can tell that is a guy in a suit. No CGI. I can tell there's a guy in a suit there. I quite like that, and I know that's a weird thing, but I quite enjoy that particular element. Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. It could move into incredible, but I think it's great. Xander episode, pretty much as much like Ethan Rain. If it's a Xander episode, it's gonna be fun. Spell goes wrong. Every woman in Sunnydale, other than Cordelia, who the spell was intended for, falls hopelessly in love with him and explores this idea of love versus obsession. And it's just so much fun. It's an absolute riot of an episode. I love the scene where they're playing Dr. Love when he's walking down the thing and all the girls looking at him and all the boys are acting incredibly jealously. This is just so much fun, and there's so many great moments. I love Willow with a pickaxe, Joyce and Jenny getting involved, Giles being so hacked off, and Amy versus Buffy. It's a lot of great stuff in this story. I really wish Amy was in the show more. It's a bit of a side note, but she only turns up when she's relevant. And I wish that Jonathan and Larry are there all the time from seasons 2 and 3. But Amy only turns up when she's relevant, so she's in Witch, and then we don't see her again until the next magic-focused episode in series 2, and then again in Gingerbread. We don't have anything in the middle to sort of bridge the gap and suggest that there is a genuine friendship there. But yeah, I really enjoyed Bewitched, Bothered, Bewildered. It's so much fun. I'm sure some people think it's ethically dodgy, but I'm just having too much fun to really care. Passion is amazing. It's such a strong story. I think it's right up there with the very best of Buffy. Well, not right up there, evidently, or else it would be in the top column. But it's such a strong, strong story. And I think it's the best episode of Angelus. You know, because obviously there was Surprise and Innocence. And then we've had these sort of 2 filler episodes where Angel's kind of just sat around not really doing anything. But this is the sadist full on. Jenny is going to restore his soul. So he chases her around, snaps her neck. Honestly, I gasped when that happened. But it's the aftermath and how that plays out. That's just a twist in itself. Decision to kill off Jenny, it ups the stakes immeasurably, but it's just a twist. But it's the way that's presented. It's Giles going to the flat and the music's playing and he finds the rose on the door and then the petals are going all the way up the stairs and lying on his bed. He's laid her out, dead. And it's him watching through the window, watching Buffy, waiting for her to get the phone call and reveling, taking so much pleasure and delight in Buffy's upset and Willow breaking down and Xander and Cordelia turning up. And those 2 characters are just constant punning normally, constant jokes, constant snarky remarks, nothing. They're so subdued. And then obviously the final moments when Giles goes full on nut job and he's got the bow and arrow and he's got fire and he totally takes the factory out. But also those final scenes between Buffy and Giles where she tells him, you know, she punches him in the face to stop him and says, you know, I can't do this without you. It's devastating. And it's a brilliant, brilliant story that just really ups the stakes of where this season's going. It almost feels like it should be just before the finale, because now there's like some sort of episodes that feel like, oh, we're going to play with fish people now, rather than immediately address this. But I can't blame that on this episode. Killed by Death is one of those examples of, okay, so last week we had this, and this week Buffy's got a cold and she's going to hospital. It should be creepier than it is. The guy, the sort of, he's not deaf, but he's called Child Death. I think that's his English name. That is a creepy as hell idea. But I don't know, maybe because of having Passion the week before, something about this episode doesn't quite click with me. Again, I don't know what that is, but something doesn't 100% work. I Only Have Eyes for You is great. This is the one I will defend as not being filler. It's not in there as filler. This is the perfect story to evaluate the Buffy and Angel relationship and where it's at now. Angel did this as well with Waiting in the Wings, where they sort of recreate this entire episode where ghosts are making people reenact events. Waiting in the Wings is better. Waiting in the Wings is a sublime episode. It's an actual masterpiece. This is great, and it lays the foundations for what was eventually done on Angel. And I think the final moments are so emotional, even for those of us who don't care about the Buffy Angel romance. It's emotional and it's earned. And I love the haunting all the way through the episode, and the fact that Giles thinks that the ghost, for the first half of the episode, he thinks it's Jenny, even though he knows really that it's not. He's trying to convince himself, and that it makes it feel like this episode should have been after Passion. And another weird thing that, you know, it feels like the grief's in here, and the grief and the heartbreak at what Angel has become is in here, when Killed by Death was sort of hanging about last week. Go Fish again fits into this weird column. Go Fish is a perfectly serviceable, fine story. It's a bit weird, but it's fine. But it just feels so out of place at this stage of the series. I'm not a person who is, as a Doctor Who fan, well, I've mentioned that a lot of times now, but as a Doctor Who fan, I don't mind filler episodes. I don't hate them. I don't really get the problem with just having a nice little fun side quest and the arc will get tied up later. But because this comes directly before the finale, and because it's where it's situated after I Only Have Eyes for You, and just before Becoming, it feels like just before the finale, we have an episode that we've got to do. So we're going to make it about fish and drugs, basically. And it's again, it's okay. I think there's some really good Xander stuff in it. And I really love the scene where Cordelia thinks he's turned into the fish, and then she sort of gives this emotional speech to him, and he's just like, taps on the shoulder. What are you doing? That's not me. but it's the placement in this series that feels weird. They even have an Angel cameo where he turns up and bites someone and then spits his blood out as like a clue. But it just feels like, oh, Angel's still hanging about, not really doing anything, not living up to his big bad title the way he should be. Becoming. Again, this is just sublime. I actually think this is probably only the third best finale. This is unbelievable. It's exquisite. It's so good. Again, I didn't care about Buffy and Angel, but they make it count. I didn't know he was coming back, so it counts less when you consider that. But then I got Angel because he was resurrected. So I've forgiven the fact that Angel was resurrected after the series, and it feels like a really brave decision to allow Buffy to stab him through the chest after he gets his memories back, and to her to have that moment before she has to do it. I think everyone has great moments in this. Kendra's death is really well done. I think it's a brilliant cliffhanger in part 1. And in part 2, Buffy just loses everything. And everything, the whole world goes against her. Willow is in pain. She's been attacked. Giles has been tortured. She's been thrown out of her own house. She's having to team up with Spike, a creature she hates, in order to do this. And she's faced with the prospect of having to kill Angel. And then after that, is it any wonder she goes off? And it's such a heart-wrenching ending with that song playing. I can't remember what the song's called. As the bus goes out and it says, you're now leaving Sunnydale. It's just a brilliant finale. It ups the stakes and it does everything perfectly. The character stuff, the emotional stuff, the plot, big plot things. Again, they're trying to rise a dark power in Sunnydale, but it doesn't feel like we're just retreading old ground because it's presented in a new and interesting manner. Is also quite funny through quite a lot of it. And I think that's the balance that Buffy perfectly strikes between the humor and the darkness. And maybe when I was less enjoying the show in season 6 and 7, it's because they lost the balance and the balance tipped dark and the humor kind of fell into the background, personally. I need a drink, blimey. This video is going to be ridiculously long. Anne is decent. There are no bad episodes in season 3. There just aren't. Or seasons 3 and 5, neither of which have an episode which are going to be occupying anything in the top bottom 2 columns, or even anything close. Well, maybe 1 or 2 might make it into the okay column, but in general, just really, really well done. Anne is fine. It's a decent story. I tend to enjoy the stuff going on in Sunnydale a lot more than Buffy's actual story in LA. It's nice seeing she's called Anne after this episode, but the girl from Lie to Me, who takes the name at the end, and Buffy just having to kind of deal with her grief, really, and being forced back into Slayerhood, by this person who she'd previously met. And the ending is a brilliant ending when Joyce opens the door and she sees her. Season 3 is the best season of the show, but it kind of starts in just a kind of average way. Dead Man's Party is fine. I don't like zombies in general as a concept, but it's done in a fun way that I can get behind it. I don't like the intervention. I think it paints everyone badly. I don't think any character comes out other than Giles. No character comes out well from this episode, but the plot's fun. I have fun watching it, and there's some really, really great moments. I love Xander going out to tell it to, not Xander, Oz. Oz goes out to tell Buffy to hit in the eye, and she just does it anyway. Like, oh well. But Giles is basically the only great character in this story. His remark with, "Oh, don't you like my mask? Isn't it pretty? It raises the dead." Americans. It's one of my favorite quotes from the show. Faith, Hope, and Trick is good. Faith, played by Eliza Dushku, is amazing. She is one of my favorite characters. She's introduced brilliantly here as a totally different character. Kendra was almost introduced to show Buffy what the ideal Slayer was like. And although Buffy basically showed her why she was stronger, but in terms of all of the things like being a Watcher's pet, basically doing all the studying, doing all the reading, learning the languages, Kendra had all of that nailed down. Faith is the total opposite. Faith is the rebel. Buffy's the middle ground. but she is just so much fun. Again, it kind of makes some of her friends look bad. And I think it makes Buffy look bad that she is so jealously guarding um, her friends, her mum, not giving Faith anything. But by the end of the episode, we've reached a new equilibrium between these characters. And that is a very enjoyable thing. Beauty and the Beast. Again, it's indecent. It's a strange take on Jekyll and Hyde, investigating things like domestic abuse. If you want a much better take of that, watch the Angel episode Billy, which sort of looks at this primal misogyny and is very scary. This is just kind of there. Buffy has a relationship with a guy called Scott, who is, a nice guy and possibly the healthiest relationship Buffy ever has for a very brief period of time. And he's got these two friends, and one of them has done this whole Jekyll and Hyde gig, but he's totally lost control of it naturally. It's fine. So much of the first 4 episodes of season 3, I feel like I'm just kind of gliding off the back of season 2's success, and it's not until we get into the really good stuff, which starts at episode 5, Homecoming. This is the ultimate Buffy and Cordelia episode. Buffy tries to take her life back as sort of by challenging Cordelia as the Sunnydale Queen. That element, again, as a British person, seems weird and alien. Prom Queen? What the flip is that? Or Homecoming Queen? I don't know what it is. But I love Cordelia, and this is a Cordelia-heavy episode, and I love that she gets so hacked off. My favourite moment is the moment where the Gorges, again, I can't say it, cowboy vampire is about to attack Buffy, and Cordelia is so hacked off that she just goes, yes, there is 2 Slayers, and if you think, and I'm the strong one, and she just basically scares this vampire into running away. She is fierce in this, and everyone's great, and I love the ending, because you think, oh, they're both going to win it, and then neither of them does. There's a 2-way tie, but it's the other 2 people who went for it, and they both just walk out. I really, really hate Willow and Xander romance. Like I feel like they needed a reason to break Cordelia and Xander up, and that's the only reason it was done, or to get something out of their systems that they they could finally put that behind them. But I really, really hate it. It's the one element of season 3 that I could really just like, no, not that. We don't want that. Bat and Candy, best of the best. Oh, I love this episode. It's so much fun. Everyone is having an absolute ball. Kirsten Sutherland as Joyce, Arbor Zimmerman as Principal Snyder, and Anthony Head as Giles. Those 3 anchor this story. All of the teenagers' reactions to their parents, their head teachers going totally mental, that's fine. But those performances are so fun. Honestly, Principal Snyder was a blast in this episode. Ethan Raid is here, which was why it's fun that all of Sunnydale's adults suddenly become like they were when they were teenagers, but kind of extreme versions of that because they've been repressed for so long. Everyone is so funny. Joyce and Giles have a brief liaison, which is so much fun to watch. This is just a ball. I could put this on and have an absolute laugh, have an absolute riot with it any single time. If I'm in a bad mood, it would cheer me up. If I'm in a good mood, I'd be even happier by the end of it. It's so much fun. Revelations is great again. Really strong episode, I think. And this is the episode where everyone discovers that Angel is back, and everyone's reactions are very mixed, and understandably so. I've seen some Buffy fans be like, oh, I hate the way that the Scoobies react in this episode. They react very naturally. Angel, when he was evil, he did torture Giles, and he did snap Giles' girlfriend's neck. And he did hurt all of the Scoobies, and he did murder their friend. They are going to be hacked off and think that Buffy is not the best judge of character. And as far as Angel goes, she kind of isn't the best judge of character. And I love Gwendolyn Post. I think she's great. She kind of is the person I think is most instrumental in isolating Faith from the rest of the Scoobies and kind of really screwing with Faith's head. And that's hugely instrumental to where her arc goes throughout the rest of the show. I also just kind of love that she's not actually a watcher. She's impersonating a watcher. She certainly used to be a watcher, but she's just there for the glove. That's all she's there for. But she can't help the fact that she just wants to slag Giles off at every single opportunity along the way. Also, I don't know if this was played by an Englishwoman, but the accent's much better. And if it wasn't, well done, because it's just nice. So often the council people come in and talk like this. Oh, for flip's sake, this is a good English accent. If it's an English person doing it, if it's an American person doing it, well done. Next, Lover's Walk. I love Lover's Walk. Incredible, incredible story. This is so much fun James Masters has brought back. This is possibly my favorite iteration of Spike. That's weird to say, but my favorite iteration of Spike is just a version of Spike that is totally like a rebound, not rebound. He's just so obsessed with Drusilla, and he's so cut up at his breakup that he can't really function. This is where the Willow and Xander stuff comes to an end, which I was very thankful for. And the shock with Cordelia when she falls through the stairs is, I gasped. That was a massive moment, and it's just so much fun. I laugh my head off every single time watching this, but it's also instrumental to the arcs of pretty much every single character, because it's the episode where Xander and Cordelia break up, and Willow finally realizes how much she loves Oz and puts Xander totally behind her after this. But Oz and Willow also temporarily break up. Buffy and Angel realize that they can't just be friends, and Spike just has a blast and plays My Way as he goes through the highway at the end. It's just an absolute riot of an episode again. The Wish is sublime, best of the best again. This is the stretch between Band Candy, Revelations, Lover's Walk, also Homecoming just before that, The Wish, continuing on through into Amends. This is the bit where season 3 just took off into the stratosphere. The Wish is an unbelievable episode. It's a brilliant concept for an episode to go for this alternate reality. I also love that it subverts the typical alternate reality story, because normally, if you did the story, you would think Cordelia is going to have to figure this one out. She's going to have to figure out how to take back her wish. But no, Cordelia gets killed off halfway through the episode, and this new version of Sunnydale is insane. It also gives us our first appearance of Anya, who is my favorite Buffy character. I actually celebrated when I was rewatching this when Emma Caulfield's name came up at the bottom. I cheered. That is how much I love her character. And it's a really interesting starting point for her, because obviously she comes to curse Xander. That's her original mission in coming here. And it ends up creating this alternate timeline where Buffy has never come to Sunnydale. I love seeing what all these characters are doing. Vampire, Willow, and Xander are brilliant. We get Mark Metcalf back as the Master. And the moment that just chills me to the bones is the final scene, where between Giles taking Anya's necklace and smashing it, he says, "What? How do you know the world will be any better than this?" He says, "Because it has to be." But more importantly, it's who everyone kills in that final battle. It's genuinely amazing. Xander kills Angel. Buffy kills Xander. Oz killing Willow really packs a punch. Like, that really hurts. And then Buffy gets her neck snapped by the Master. Did I mention Buffy kills Xander as well? It's insane, and I get chills watching it. And there's this sort of, I don't know what style of music it is, but it's just like a vocalist just in this haunting soundtrack to this. All of our main characters murdering each other, and it's a really chilling moment. I think this is a phenomenal story. Brilliant concept, very well executed. Amends is another episode that I didn't really get on board with the first time I watched it. Well, I didn't dislike it. I thought it was fine. But in hindsight, it's much better. Not only because the first evil is a cool concept that comes back, but mainly because this is basically the backdoor pilot for the Angel series. And I didn't get it the first time. First time I watched it, and when the snow happened, I was like, well, that's nice and everything, but why is the snow here now? It's so roasted. Why is there snow? Powers that be is the answer to that question. Angel couldn't kill himself because the powers that be needed him to go to LA and have his own mission. And now that I understand that, this is a much better episode for me. It also brings back Jenny, and it allows Angel's grief to really, and guilt to really manifest in a way that it hasn't before. Because he's come back in season 3, and because of the circumstances of his return, he hasn't had to really deal with what he did in the second season. And it's really nice to see him having to grapple with that. And I now think that the ending, which I originally thought was cheesy and weird, I now think is beautiful. specifically because I watched Angel and I have that, I can recontextualize the whole thing. Gingerbread. Okay. Gingerbread is the worst episode of season 3. Not bad, but the worst. And again, it's because it promises me, just like Ted, it promises me an interesting concept and then doesn't follow through with it. This posits that these two children are murdered. Joyce finds these two children and Sunnydale reacts in a way that it never does. People in Sunnydale actually seem to care about the fact that there's just dead children. You know, for most of the show, people die all the time at the school. People die all the time at Sunnydale, but no one cares because it's this big secret that they don't talk about. But this idea that they finally had enough, that the people have finally had enough, and this story about how Sunnydale, the town, which is almost like a personality of its own within the context of the show, how they react to this tragedy. And I actually think that the demon in Are You Now or Have You Ever Been, which is the second episode of the second series of Angel, would have been the perfect fit here, because I think that the children should really have been dead and the demon should have heightened the tension leading to the witch hunt, but not been the only thing that was creating that panic and that hysteria. And I think that that cheapens this episode quite substantially. Also, again, it feels dated. It's a story about the sort of moral panic regarding witchcraft and magic, and sort of stories regarding witchcraft and magic that happened in sort of conservative America in the late 1990s. That kind of means very little to me. I've grown up in an era of Harry Potter. It's normal, but this was before that. And yeah, it does feel very dated. It's still a fine episode, and I like seeing Amy again. And there's some fun stuff. And I love Oz and Xander having to kind of go rogue and climb through the roof, and moments like that. Some great quotes from Cordelia when she tells Giles, one of these days you're going to wake up in a coma. But there's not enough here for me to say that this is anything higher than just okay, because it kind of squanders its potential. Helpless. Incredible. Yeah, I think this is a Giles. Okay, I'm chucking great. As soon as I've chucked this in great, this is going to kind of screw with my entire page. Helpless is a really great story. I think it gives us the Watchers Council through Quentin Travers and a bunch of other people who are clearly not English doing the accent. This is not the last time I'm going to bring up the accent thing. And I should have mentioned it for Kendra. Man alive, could she not do that accent? That is one of the worst accents I've ever heard on TV. But moving past that, Helpless is a brilliant episode for the Buffy and Giles relationship. I love how fast she forgives him. I love how conflicted that he is by this archaic, what's it called? It's an archaic tradition of cruelty. I think that's what he says. Archaic exercise and cruelty. And how far he's come from where he started in terms of, he would have been in line with someone like Quentin Travers when he first arrived. But now that he's actually on the ground, now he's actually realizes how cruel what the council want him to do is. I love that Buffy has to be clever to win this fight against this really, really cool vampire. It's a really strong episode, and it has a kicker of a twist at the end when Giles gets sacked by the council, which leads to the arrival of Wesley, who is my favorite character in the entirety of the Buffyverse. But he's not on Buffy. On Buffy, he's just fine. On Angel, he is the best. But I'll get to that when I get there. The Zeppo is great. I really enjoy the Zeppo. I think it has a lot of stuff in it that is like the first time I watched it, I didn't really get the plot. That I enjoyed the meta aspect of this episode, and that's still my favorite. The fact that the show is outright parodying itself at this point is my favorite element of the story. The scene between Buffy and Angel is absolutely hilarious when it's just the way it's viewed through Xander's eyes, and there's the big dramatic music in there. And I love how this episode frames the massive apocalypse, the worst thing we've ever faced, and has all these melodramatic conversations, and it's a joke. And we're not focusing on the A plot. We're not focusing on the Hellmouth being opened. No, nothing like that. We're all focused on the B plot. We're focused on Xander trying to stop these 4 dead guys from blowing up the school. And I think it's a brilliant episode for Xander because I think he's a totally underrated character, and he also is undervalued by everyone else, and he undervalues himself in terms of what he can actually do. He's very capable, and they all kind of screw him over in this episode because they're like, "Oh, you just get in the way, you want to be safe." But I think this really gets the essence of Xander's character and why he's one of my favorites. It's because in every single time in this episode, when he meets anyone and they're all getting involved, Willow, Giles, Buffy, he says them very simple things. They're all saying, "This is bad, this is awful, this is," and he goes, "What can I do?" That's his only question is, "How can I help?" That's what he says. "How can I help?" And I think that's what makes him such a great character, that he always tries, that he always, gives his best to help. And maybe that isn't always enough. And maybe, sometimes he does get knocked out. Maybe sometimes he does need rescuing. But this is a guy who has no powers whatsoever. He's just an ordinary guy who used to get beaten up at school by everyone, who is now fighting, these creatures and running headfirst quite often into these life or death situations. And I love how capable he is in this story, and he gets his entire story. He gets the girl with Faith, kind of, and there's just so many brilliant moments. I think that the plot itself is perfectly serviceable and fine, but it's the meta aspects and the character stuff that really elevates this to a great. This honestly could have been the Incredible Column. There's a really fine line between those two, but I'll stick it in great and leave it at that. Bad Girls and Consequences is also great. I think really, again, really strong story. Faith is one of my favorites, as I've already kind of made clear. And this is the big episodes for her arc, which ends with her killing the deputy mayor by accident. But also shows, I think Faith is more than just a darker reflection. She's more than just like this dark slayer. She's a darker reflection of what Buffy could be. But not only if Buffy was bad, but you see the influence that Faith has on Buffy throughout the story. This idea that, Slayer, that you should enjoy it, you should live it, you should be loving every element of your job. But she goes too far, and I think it's a brilliant first part. And then obviously with the kicker of the twist at the end. And the second part, I would actually say, is probably the better part. Just dealing with exactly, with what the episode's called, the consequences of their actions, and the fact that she really can't deal. She might say she's fine, but she's really not. And her telling Giles that it was actually Buffy that killed people, and just how lost she gets in this story. Also, this is the story that introduces Wesley Wyndham-Pryce, Alexis Denisov, as the only American man ever to convincingly do an English accent that I didn't for 1 second suspect was put on until, honestly, months after I finished watching Angel for the first time. Apparently he's from America. Who knew? Because it's really well done, and he's one of my favorites. And even on Buffy, when people hate him, I really quite like him. I find him charming and likable in a hapless, goofy kind of way. And he's not particularly impactful in either of these two episodes. He's kind of a joke, but he's fun. He's a fun little addition to have, and as a nice little foil for Giles. Doppelgangland is incredible. Alison Hannigan absolutely nails this part. There's so many funny moments. There's so many darker moments, and it's an incredibly fun episode. And it's the sort of episode that Buffy was at this point totally excelling at. The episodes were saying, that's a fun little concept. I wonder how that will go. And it gives us Emma Caulfield again, which I was very happy about. I love Anya. She is the best. And also Willow was at this point was my favorite character. And basically until Anya came along, Willow was my favorite. So it's nice to see her really get these two very different characters to play, and she really just gets to show off her range. And it's just a fun story all the way through. Enemies, when I can pick it up. Enemies is good. Actually, great. Yeah, I would say so. It's a really strong story. I think that the Angel twist actually caught me off guard with the fact that he was pretending the whole time he wasn't actually all soulless again. The mayor is so much fun in this story. I think he's a great villain. I probably should have mentioned that by this point, but there's so much going on in this video. I just have to talk about the episodes. You can't really remember who gets introduced where. Yeah, this is a really strong one. And I think you get a really good portrayal of where Faith is at in this episode. Not because you understand, because when she finally reveals herself, her resentment at Buffy is very obvious. And the fact that there should only be one Slayer is kind of a large part of that. The fact to say, you've got the friends, you get the Scoobies, you get the family, you get this town, and who gets thanked whenever I do anything? You. Is not correct, but it's where her headspace is at. And yeah, as I said, a really good twist. Earshot. Great. I'm a broken record. I'm just chucking everything in this column. Earshot is a really strong story. I think Jonathan's been a really good side character throughout the whole time. Just like as someone sitting in the background, she never really gets to do anything. But this really puts him to good use and kind of propels his arc as a character forward. There's something to do with Columbine that happened that meant this episode was changed or postponed or something, which is totally understandable. That they wouldn't want to air that after that. Lord knows what that did to the series. Did the whole series get pushed back, or did I have no idea. But I think it's a really strong episode. It has some fun elements. I love the fact that you can. What is going on here? No idea. I love the fact that you can now sort of see. Where was I? I have not a clue what the screen just did. Earshot is a great story. It gives Buffy the reveal that Joyce and Giles had sex. That's what I was about to say. It has some really funny moments as well. Moving swiftly on to choices, which is good, but it's absolutely filler. Willow gets kidnapped. They learn some stuff. It's fine. I don't have anything really much to say. The prom is great. Blimey, I'm just overfilling this column. The story with Tucker training these pack of hellhounds to attack the prom is very much just what Buffy was about in the first 3 series. But it's the actual scenes at the prom at the end that really elevate this story. The class protector award moment is beautiful. Angel turning up to the dance is amazing. Everyone at the dance is great. Gives me so many moments that I love. This sort of bonding between Giles and Wesley when he's just like, oh, for God's sake, man, you have the, what does he say? You have the emotional maturity of a blueberry scone or something like that. Also, Anya asking Xander to the prom in the most unromantic way possible. I've witnessed centuries of oppression against by the males of the species. I really enjoy it, and the final moments with the cover of Rolling Stones, Wild Horses playing and them all dancing. It's just it's a beautiful calm before the storm. Go Fish was the annoying calm before the storm because just get to the storm already. This is the beautiful calm before what graduation day is going to do, because these people probably kind of think that they're going to die next week. And that's a really strong motivator for this whole story. Graduation day, parts 1 and 2. Exquisite again. Part 1 is brilliant. There's so much great character stuff packed in. Faith is at her sort of most evil. I think the hand-to-hand fight combat between Buffy and Faith is the best fight sequence in the entirety of Buffy. Between this and the other Buffy Faith fight in season 4, just some really, really strong moments all the way through. And I love the fact that the Scoobies marshal this army of students at the end. Because these Scoobies have been outcast, they're misfits. Xander is controlling an army, and that's brilliant. And I love the fact that everyone's come so far. And the Angel stuff in this episode is also good, but it's kind of much better when I consider that it's setting up Angel itself. I really enjoy the fact that people they're not happy that he has used Buffy's blood. Obviously, she made him do it, but they are not chuffed by that. And he's kind of burnt his bridges in Sunnydale, other than the bridge he has with Angel, with Buffy anyway, which he burnt in the last episode. I think Wesley turning up to fight is a great moment. Buffy quitting the Watchers Council. There is so much packed into 2 episodes here, but it feels like the end of the era, really, because it is the end. It's the end of the high school era, and it's just a really brilliant story. I need to crack on. The Freshman is decent, fine. There's one thing I love and one thing that I really dislike, and this kind of splits the difference. I love the villain. I really love, I think he's called Sunday. Friday, some day of the week thing. She is great. I've heard a lot of great theories about her, that maybe she was like a slayer or something, and that's why she's so strong. But this whole idea of this vampire cult on campus, it keeps the Hellmouth stewing over. But honestly, the first half of the episode, before we get there, particularly the stuff with is Buffy socially awkward now? Why is Buffy feeling so lonely, whereas Willow is like a social butterfly? That just kind of like that role reversal kind of screws my head, and this makes me feel like, oh, they want us to feel sad for Buffy, but they're making Willow like really, really sociable and chatty for some reason now. Instead, the episode is totally saved when Xander rocks up in Liberons, when Buffy is sitting feeling sorry for herself, and just basically goes, "You're my hero," and tells, you can do anything, buck your ideas up, let's sort this vampire out. And it's a really great example of where Xander's going to go over the course of the next two series as well. The next episode is Living Conditions, which I am not a fan of. Obviously, the high school thing is all supposed to be like relatable things that people go through at high school. This is supposed to be a thing that's relatable for people who go to university or college. But, well, certainly in Britain, they don't do this anymore. They don't have people share dorms with, or not dorms, they don't have people share rooms with random people. So this kind of, it fails to be relatable. And then you have to just take it as an episode on quality itself. And I don't find it particularly funny. I think it goes for a kind of more low-hanging fruit humor than Buffy tends to be, which is also a criticism I'm going to come back to with Beer Bad. This is just not a particularly strong story. The villains, they're not actually villains, but the look on the demons is really cool. But there's a lot of stuff in this that I think is quite good. The Harsh Light of Day is the first part of a two-parter, but the second part takes place on Angel, which is a really interesting way to do things. Spike returns. He's a lot of fun. Harmony returns. She is now an absolute bundle of joy. It's last appearance of Devon and the other members of Oz's band, as far as I remember. Oz and Willow are good fun in this. Everyone's kind of, just putting in a solid performance. The aftermath of Buffy and Parker, which was a necessary storyline, I feel, to tell in order to create a sort of sense of relatability about things, but isn't necessarily that fun to watch on screen. On the other hand, what is fun to watch on screen is Spike, who's an absolute joy. The Ring of Amara is a really, really great concept, great idea, but I love that he gets this sort of this thing that will make him invulnerable, and Buffy just beats him by taking it off his finger. It's just making fun of the ludicrous concept, I think, and that's quite an important thing for me. Fear itself is also great. I'm a broken record, man alive. Fear itself is brilliant. I love Halloween stories. I think that they often bring out the best in the Buffy creators. I will see Band Candy as a Halloween episode, but technically it's not. And technically this is only the second after the original episode, Halloween. There's a lot of great stuff. You get to see where the team are at in terms of their fears and where exactly they're at. But also you get to see a lot of where they're going, particularly with Willow and Oz, and exactly where those two are at in their relationship at that point, and where Xander is feeling basically useless and left out of the dynamic at this point. I should have mentioned last week, Anya returns. This week has some of my favorite moments. Anya in the bunny costume, Giles with the chainsaw, Xander in his tux, just in case they get turned into their costumes again. And the final twist, the demon that they were trying to stop arriving is like this small, and he's tiny. Who's a little fear demon? Who's a little fear demon? Only Buffy could do that. Only Buffy could do that, and it works so well. Beer Bad, not a fan. First time I watched it was fine. Subsequent rewatches have not been kind to this, because it's a slapstick comedy episode, basically, where Buffy becomes a caveman. This show is incredibly intelligent with its humor, with its wit, a lot of subversion of the genre, a lot of subversion of expectations, and just clever little wordplay. Whereas this is dumb humor, which means it's not so enjoyable, in my opinion. This episode tends to get quite critically panned, I think. So I'm probably with everyone on that. Wild at Heart is okay. I'm not a fan of the way this plays out. I've got to be honest. I think Oz deserved a better send off than this. He kind of got one in Newman Rising, but for the time being, this is how he goes out. And I don't think the storyline was set up as well as they thought it was going to be done. I know that's because Seth Green was leaving earlier than expected, so they didn't have an entire series to do this story, which is what they wanted. Why am I getting those random videos again? So they didn't get as long to do this as they actually wanted, but there was a lot of good stuff in here as well. I think Alison Hannigan and Seth Green both play it really, really well. But it feels like an unsatisfactory ending for Oz. It feels premature, and it feels like they haven't properly developed where they want this to go. I understand the behind-the-scenes reasons for that problem, but it doesn't make it any more enjoyable as a viewer. The initiative is great. I think I'm a season 4 defender. Maybe my position, I feel like a lot of my sort of controversial opinions are just a revisionist opinion. People who watched the show at the time tend to have two opinions that I don't have. They don't like season 4, and I think a large part of that is because it was so much change, and they don't like Dom, and I think a large part of that was because it felt like they were kind of being slapped in the face with something they didn't really want, didn't really ask for, and that the entire show was being rewritten to accommodate it. Whereas if you're just watching it now, none of those things really bother you. And the initiative, I think, is a really solid story arc. It's not amazing, and I think Adam is bad. Okay, I'm not taking a revisionist perspective on that, but the initiative, I think, is great. I love the reveal of it. I love the idea that Riley and Graham and Forrest, who've been kind of introduced to, are a part of it. And that opening shot where they show the scale of this thing is brilliant. And there's a lot of good Spike stuff in this as well, particularly his moment when he can't bite, and they sort of play it off as off with Willow as like he was having some issues getting it up. I think that's a really, really cleverly written part of the episode. Pangs, I don't know if it's controversial. I think this deserves to be in the top column with Prophecy Girls, your Halloweens, your big finales, your best episodes. I think this is the funniest piece of Buffy ever. The script on this is perfection. I was in tears with laughter. Honestly, I was crying over there in that seat when I was watching this episode. I was crying with laughter. It's so perfectly written and acted, and everyone's comedic timing is brilliant. But it's also quite thoughtful about Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving being a sham. But it also provides that kind of more liberal perspective. But then it also kind of takes the mick out of that liberal perspective. With Spike being, with people being, with Willow kind of making all these hopeless suggestions, which is like, oh, no, maybe we can try and appease it and give it some land. And Spike's just like, you exterminated his race. What are you going to do that's going to make that any better? And the fact is, there's nothing you can do that's going to make that any better. I just find this episode so much fun. Bear, you made a bear, undo it. The scene with the bikes, that was the scene I was crying and laughing with. I think when the cycling, big dramatic music, the arrows all sitting through Spike, it's just so much fun. It's an amazing story, and it's probably the one that I'm going to get the most pushback in for putting it in the top column, above things like Innocence and Doppelgangland and Lie to Me. Pangs, really? But I just think this episode is so fun. Something Blue. Honestly, these 3 episodes are the best run of standalone episodes in the entirety of Buffy. Pangs, Something Blue, and Hush. Something Blue is an absolute blast. I enjoy it every single time I watch it. And it's also quite sad because obviously it's Willow's grief and sort of upset that is causing all this problem, but also it causes absolute flipping hilarity. Xander, as a demon magnet, Giles is blind, and Buffy and Spike get engaged, and the absolute highlight of the episode. It's just a lot of fun. Hush is the best episode of Buffy up to this point. Better than Graduation Day and Becoming, and all of those. I think up until this point, this is the strongest story. The strength of this show is its dialogue and its characters, richly written characters. And that's all stripped back. We've still got the characters, but there's no dialogue, absolutely nothing. The music in this episode is absolutely gorgeous. The gentlemen are genuinely creepy and effective. The cutting out of the hearts. It's the first time meeting Tara, which is absolutely amazing. She's adorable in this. Just so many brilliant moments. So and actually genuinely very, very, very funny without any dialogue. They can still do all of the comedic things with hand gestures and with drawings and with it's just done so well. And I think it's a genuinely delightful episode to watch, ending with Riley and Buffy discovering each other's identities, which is highly important to the character arcs that are going on there. Doomed is good. Buffy's attitude towards her relationship with Riley is annoying, if I'm being totally honest. But I'm having enough enjoyment out of the plot out of Spike and Xander, and where they're at. Spike trying to stay himself, Spike in that shirt after flooding the whole place. And then the final fight, as again we are opening the Hellmouth, and Riley really getting to see what Buffy's life is like, I suppose. It's got some good stuff in it, but it's not a masterpiece or anything. But I think it is a decent story. A New Man is also in good. I didn't really enjoy this one the first time I watched it, but it's an Ethan Rayne's story. It's fun. It's given us bonkers, off the wall concepts. And Anthony Head doesn't really get a lot to do in a lot of season 4. And that's kind of a prevalent theme for his character, is the fact that he kind of feels a little bit irrelevant now. He's no longer her watcher. They're not at school. He doesn't have a job. And I just found this episode so much fun. Spike and Giles' road trip is an absolute blast. And there's some really great moments. And I think just like Helpless, which is episode 12 of the last series, this is, a real testament to Buffy and Giles' relationship and where their relationship is at this point in time. It's a bit of a documentation, and her recognizing him only by his eyes when he's even in demon form is a really, really nice thing. I mean, I didn't recognize him by his eyes. I always presumably it was Anthony Head under that mask. But it's just a very fun story. Amid some arc-heavy episodes, just to have this light burst of relief, and him chasing Maggie Walsh is just the funniest thing going. Absolutely brilliant. Goodbye, Iowa. The Iron Team, Goodbye, Iowa, is a good initiative, arc-heavy two-parter. The first part has a lot of initiative stuff, a lot of Willow feeling isolated away from Buffy because she's getting involved in the initiative and all these things going on, ending with Maggie Walsh trying to kill her, but not succeeding. But then Maggie Walsh herself gets killed by Adam. Now, I don't like Adam very much, but Goodbye, Iowa is very strong because it shows Riley with Mark Lucas's best performance as he's coming down from all the drugs that Maggie Walsh has basically been pumping into these guys and really screwing with them. And it kind of gives Riley this central thing in this series where he doesn't know whose side he's on. He's just an ordinary guy who's been plucked into this. Now he doesn't know whether he's right, whether the government's right, whether the Scoobies are right. He has no clue what's going on, and he sees Buffy, with Hostile 17 in the house, and he sees him go into Willie's bar with all these demons and vampires sitting, and he doesn't know who is in the right anymore. And people probably hate him for all those things, but that's what makes him compelling, in my opinion. I don't actually like Riley, particularly. He's fine, but I don't hate him anywhere near as much as everyone else does. This Year's Girl and Who Are You? Incredible. Actually, what's remarkable about this story is it's kind of actually the start of a 4-part for Faith. There's 2 parts here and 2 parts over on Angel. The 2 parts on Angel are even better. They are perfect. Genuinely 10 out of 10 top-notch TV. This is also brilliant. The first episode is great. You get a lot of good Faith stuff, and the return of the mayor for his little cameo on the screen. I also love all of Faith's dream sequences in this. I think they're really, really well done. And the first foreshadowing of Dawn, possibly. No, actually, that was more foreshadowing for Dawn in this story. But I think the first one was actually in Graduation Day. Little sis coming. There's a lot of really, really good stuff in this story. The body swap at the end kind of takes it to a new level. Lots of fun body swap and shenanigans. I think Sarah Michelle Gellar plays Eliza Dushku very well, but Eliza's performance as Buffy is the one that really impressed me in the last time I was watching it. Just a whole new level of whoa. She has seriously studied the mannerisms in order to get her there. It's a very difficult thing to do, to play someone stuck in someone else's body, because if you have to do the mannerisms and all that kind of thing, you have to really study the way that they act and behave. and that was done really, really well. And I think it's a really good faith story as well, because she realizes that she doesn't want to be the bad guy. She does want to be the hero, but she doesn't know how, and she doesn't want Buffy to be the hero as well. She wants to be Buffy, basically. And she doesn't get on the plane. She goes back to help those people in that church because it's wrong. What they're doing is wrong. Really, really strong story. Superstar. I love Superstar. It's so much fun. Just a top-notch script all the way through. Really, really well written. I think Danny Strong is phenomenal in this story. And I just love that the writers just decide to chuck you in at the deep end. There's no sense of people are going to be really confused when we do this. You know, often these, like, the Wish doesn't, but like if the Wish started with Cordelia in the alternate dimension, obviously we can't do that. But in this occasion, they just throw you in the deep end and you have to work out what's going on. It's very funny. I love the fact that they redid the title sequences with shots of Jonathan in it. I love all the subtle differences in this world. In fact, that everyone's so hung up on this character. I think this is a really strong story. Apparently, some people don't like it. I've accepted that my opinion on season 4 is not common at this point. I really enjoy season 4. I think it's very underrated. Although, having said that, Where the Wild Things Are, I'm not a fan. It's the episode where Buffy and Riley have sex. Sandra and Anya have an argument. I should suggest Buffy and Riley having sex is it's not just a thing that happens in the episode. It is the episode. It's the reason for the whole plot happening. It's just a weird episode. Some stuff is okay, but what was the takeaway? Because, like, obviously all television is giving messaging, and then we meet this woman who's caused the problems in this house because she has repressed all these teenagers. Yeah, so her doing that is bad, but also Buffy and Riley having sex is basically the reason why all the problems are happening in the first place, and the reason why Anya ends up with a flipping stalk through her hand. So is it bad? Is sex bad? What's the takeaway? I'm not sure what the messaging is trying to tell me here. Newman Rising is good. It's a much better ending for Oz. I think it gives a lot of great stuff for Tara, alongside Willow, and there's a lot of great stuff in this story. I'm losing my voice. I think it's a very important episode for Riley as well. I really enjoy him in this episode, having to face this position between the anarchists and the government, and realizing when he sees Oz in that cage that what he is doing, the side that he is fighting for, isn't the right side. Again, people who don't like Riley probably don't like that element of the episode. And I love the final scene between Oz and Willow. I think it's a really great final scene. Although technically it's not the last time Seth Green is in Buffy, because he's in Restless. But it's a nice final goodbye for his character, and that makes a lot more sense plot wise. The Yoko Factor and Primeval, I don't know, because I wouldn't put these as, I wouldn't class these as a two-parter. Why am I down here again? I wouldn't class this necessarily as a two-parter. I've totally lost. Oh, for the love of all. I'll just explain my feelings on it. The Yoko Factor and Primeval is... The Yoko Factor is a good episode that really tests the dynamic, and Primeval is fun. That's kind of the main takeaway. I think Primeval is a really fun, big episode that kind of ties up all of the problems that people had in this series. You know, the deliberately skewed character dynamics, all of these things really gets put to good use. And I love the spell they have to use to fight Adam. Even if I don't love Adam himself, even if I don't love Riley and Forrest and all that, I still think you can really enjoy this episode. It also looks great. There's all these big slow motion fighting shots with fire bursting up behind them. It's great. Feels big stakes. Speaking of great, Restless is, I would chuck incredible. I nearly put this episode in the best of best. There is one reason. I'm a little bit confused on a couple of details, but this is brilliant. The direction and music in this episode is the best that Buffy will ever have. The best music and the direction. This whole episode is gorgeous. There's a shot of Miss Kitty Fantastico, the cat, sort of walking at the start, and it's like nothing you've ever seen on this show before. Also, I just appreciate the ballsy weirdness of having this as the final episode of the series. Just the outright, what? What's the cheese guide? Like you're sitting there the whole time going, this feels really weird, because the finale was last week in terms of the series finale, but this is like this midway point in Buffy where they have this episode which foreshadows so much of the future. And everyone's dream sequences are great. I think there's so many classic, iconic moments scattered all throughout that, and it really plays the dream really, really well. It's very difficult to shoot something that actually looks dreamlike, but the way that people just walk into rooms and total weird stuff happening, without people questioning it. That's the thing that happens in dreams. Just weird stuff happens. I don't even really question what's going on. I also love that they brought back Seth Green for this, although he doesn't really get much to do, and it's a shame that he doesn't really get much to do in his final ever appearance. There was a bit of a sense of, people in dreams don't, it's not like, oh, well, they're not on the show anymore, so they wouldn't be in their dreams. And apparently David Boreanaz was supposed to be in this episode, but he was busy doing stuff for Angel, which is, totally expected. But it seems quite natural that people who are no longer in your life would still make into the dreams, and I quite like that as a little factor. Series for season 5. Buffy versus Dracula is good. I think this episode is a lot of fun. The guy who plays Dracula seems to be having a ball with it. A lot of the stuff is really well set up. I think Xander is hilarious in the story. This is Xander and Anya both absolute peaking at in season 5. They are hilarious the whole way through. And it's just a really fun little episode with a absolute mind-blowing twist in the last seconds. The cliffhanger on this, the reveal of Dawn, and everyone, I don't even know how do audiences react to that back in the day, because I knew it was coming and I was still shocked. Just an insane premise. The real me is decent. I think this episode is actually kind of the stumbling block for a reason a lot of people don't like Dawn, because you get this extra insight into her head with the way that she sees things and everything. But I actually really enjoy the little diary entries and things. The plot itself is fine, although Harmony having minions is absolute gold and I think absolutely hilarious. But I really enjoy her descriptions of Willow and Xander and all of these things. There's a lot of great moments in this story, and I love that they didn't give away who Dawn was straight away. They were happy to let people stew and keep them in the dark. This is probably the reason why people don't like Dawn, because they were kept in the dark for this long and they didn't know what was going on. But because as someone who does like Dawn, this is still a really solid episode. I think it it very much earns its place in that decent column. The replacement is great. Oh dear, we are on several layers of the great column now. I think the replacement is so much fun. Xander is brilliant in this story. The first time I watched it, I thought, oh, he's being too silly. He's being too stupid. But again, recontextualizing everything, because that is the point. He's split into this good elements and his bad elements. It's a really, really fun story. Anya is hilarious in it. We get our first chance of seeing the flat. Xander really gets to see his worth again, because I think, he obviously did get to see that in the Zeppo, but then season 4 was demoralizing for him because he was unemployed, he had nothing, he felt like he was a hopeless, directionless loser who was going nowhere. And it's a really, really strong episode for him. Also, it looked great. Apparently this is because Nicholas Brendan actually is a twin, and his twin did the double takes. Obviously Nicholas Brendan was playing both characters when in close-ups, but in terms of for filming it always looks like there's two of him, because there actually was two two Brendans, basically. Out of my mind. Good. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. It's a decent Riley-centric episode, which is probably why it's less popular, but it finally gives Spike some chance to bite back at where he's at, and show that he is still dangerous in a sense. Harmony's also a lot of fun in this. And again, we're still being kept in the dark as to who Dawn is, something that will be rectified very, very soon. No Place Like Home, I'm probably going to say great, to be honest with you. I think it's a really strong episode. I love that they kept us in the dark for this long, but they probably couldn't have really dragged it out much longer, giving us some answers. The only thing that I think has going against this episode is on rewatch, they try to play it as if Dawn might be a villain, but obviously that's not where it's going to go, because the actual villain is amazing. Glory is my favorite big bad of Buffy. She is so much fun, and she comes to the fold in this episode, and she's absolutely brilliant, and bonkers, and totally off her head. Basically, she is an absolute joy. This whole episode is an absolute joy. And I think that the twist at the end, that when the monk says she's an innocent in this, and that she doesn't know that her life is a lie, was a really, really good twist. And I still think the decision to bring Dawn to the series was genius. And the whole arc of season 5 is my favorite arc. Family goes into incredible television. I think it's a brilliant story that does so many things so well. Tara was underdeveloped in season 4. She was simply Willow's girlfriend. That was it. This is such a strong episode for her. We can get so much more backstory, so much more things. And I think that the final scene in the bronze, between the happy stuff when everyone's just sort of like having fun, and then the beautiful final moment between Willow and Tara when they're floating. It's just a really gorgeous episode. Like, it's not groundbreaking, there's nothing massive, major happening here, but it's fun and it's sweet, and it's a really, really strong episode. Fool for Love, also incredible. I'm a bit of a sucker for season 5. I think it's second only to season 3, to be honest. I think it's really, really strong and very, very close between season 3 and 5. Fool for Love is a great episode because it gives us Spike. It shows Spike and why you should still take him seriously, because that was always the danger that we're going to fall into, was that you think, oh, he's just hopeless Spike. We get to watch him murder 2 Slayers in this episode. We get to see him on full-on sadist, but also balancing his newfound crush would be the American word. I don't know what the British word for that is. For Buffy, and balancing those 2 things out is really what makes this such an interesting episode to watch. I love the flashbacks. I love the way that the story is told, the way that it's shot as well, between the 2 fights, the fight that he is showing Buffy how he did it, and the actual fights where it's all cut. And I love the scene in the Boxer Rebellion because it gives us that iconic shot of Buffy, Darla, Angel, and Drusilla, all 4 of them. Not Buffy, how? Spike, Angel, Darla, and Drusilla. That's what I was meant to say. All walking away from the flames bursting up behind them, and they just look amazing. Honestly, we deserved an episode with all 4 of them in it. And this was the closest that we got, and it's really, really good. Shadow, decent. The snake is fine. I actually think the CGI is much better than there was on the mare. I think the CGI gets slagged on this a lot, but I actually think it looks perfectly fine, if I'm being totally honest with you. There's a lot of weird elements in this story, but actually I think it's held together by the emotional crux of Joyce's illness and discovering what Joyce's illness is at the end of this episode, which is a really heartbreaking moment. That then carries on into the next 2 episodes, which are kind of centered around Joyce. I would put that one in, this one in, maybe, again, this is being categorized as a 2-parter. To me, it's not a 2-parter. Listening to Fear would probably go in good. No, probably go in okay. And I'd probably put Into the Woods in good. So I'll chuck it in decent, actually. Listening to Fear is fine. It's an interesting little 2-parter. The Queller Demon is pretty cool. I don't care that it's an alien. It's so weird. It does weird stuff. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And Into the Woods kind of deals with the Riley stuff. Fine. But my main big takeaway from that is that it feels a lot better than the way that Oz was done. But honestly, I more care about the amazing speech that Xander gives to Anya at the end of the episode, where he really realizes how much he truly loves her. Whereas Riley and Buffy's relationship, again, it's the same with Angel. I was never particularly invested, so I'm not exactly heartbroken. It's an interesting idea for an episode, but it kind of makes Riley look bad. Not just that he's been getting, letting vampires bite him. That's one thing, but the ultimatum makes him look bad. which, considering that his kind of arc was about being kind of just a normal, nice guy getting thrown into the world, it seems like a weird. It's not. It's the correct ending, but it kind of feels a little bit off, and that's the reason why it's not. I don't see it as better. Triangle is decent again. Again, there's nothing below the decent column in season 4. In season 5, there won't be. I think Triangle is among the weaker stuff in this season. I think there's some really good stuff between Anya and Willow, and Olaf's a lot of fun. But it's just filler. But it's good, fun filler. So I'm on board with that. Checkpoint is great. I think it's a really, really strong story. It gives brings the Watchers Council back into the fold, even with some people who can't necessarily do the English accent so well. The actual Buffy being interviewed thing is less interesting than the elements when the Watchers are all interviewing different members of the Scoobies. Are interviewing Xander and Anya is hilarious. With Willow and Tara is brilliant as well. Spike is trying to throw some random spanners into the mix. It's very fun, and it has a really brilliant ending. Not only the revelation that Glory she's not a demon, she's a god, but Buffy just tells the Watchers Council that, what are you going to do if you don't take me on? Absolutely nothing. And standing up for them, when they're saying you can't take civilians, it's like, what do you know? Yes, Xander has no powers, but he's clocked up more field time than any single member of the council, probably all of them put together. So you can all get stuffed. It's a really great ending. I think it's a really strong episode. Could even push into the next column, but I'm trying to be not too. Blood Ties, again, very good episode. Again, it's probably an episode that makes people think they don't like Dawn, but I think her reaction is kind of very justified. If you discovered that you weren't real and that your mum wasn't really your mum, I think it's probably a parallel to adoption. I think it's kind of the whole point, and discovering you're adopted very, very late in life. The moment when she cuts herself is just heartbreaking, and there's so many just really great scenes all throughout this episode. Also, this is the what? How Glory is Ben? That Ben is what? Honestly, I still need to figure out after this episode. I watched them do it. And I thought, did they just switch places or something? Is there some connection between Ben and Glory? I was as clueless as Xander and all of the Scoobies were throughout the later episodes of this season. But it's a really, really interesting way to frame it, and it's a really cool idea for a villain to keep them. Also, to give a narrative reason why. Because sometimes villains just turn up, and because of the structure of a Buffy season, they have evil plans, but they just hang about for episodes whenever stuff happens. This gives an actual reason. Glory isn't here all of the time. Ben is here a lot of the time, which is all elements I really enjoy. Crush can also go in great. A lot of good Spike stuff. Drusilla is back, and she's an absolute blast. And it's just a really solid story. I think the scene on the train when they see what Drusilla has done is kind of horrible, and it's one of the darkest moments of the show. Should Spike have left with Drusilla? No, I think Spike is done really well in this season, and I don't hate the fact that he's mellowed over the course of the show. I think he has a really good story arc going all the way through. He's a lot of fun, and Drusilla is an absolute right. I've already said that. Right, let's move on to the next one. I Was Made to Love You. Good episode. It's difficult to not put this in some sort of context because Warren's in this, and this is his first story, and this is the man who goes on to murder Tara. So it's difficult to not put it in the context, and to even just take the last minute out of it, because the cliffhanger at the end, obviously, that goes into the body is huge. But it's just a fun story on its own. I think the girl who plays April is a lot of fun, and yeah, it's a nice little story that has some really, really funny moments all scattered all the way through it. The Body. Right, hang on. I'm going to have to actually scroll up. Can we go up? Can we go up? No, we can't. We're going to have to... The Body is immaculate. I think it's the second best episode of Buffy. There will be another one coming very soon, which I'll say is better. I think it's perfect. It's actually perfect script writing and perfect acting from everyone involved. It's just such a unique way to frame a grief episode. There is no music at all. There is no, it's so natural. And I think the fact that on this supernatural show they gave Joyce such a natural, unavoidable death is a really brave move to go, and everyone gets brilliant moments from it. I did cry when I watched this. This is the first time I cried on Buffy. I could cry when I watched this. Buffy's heartbreak when she hears the word, when she says the word body out loud. Giles' sort of realization of what's going on is a brilliant moment. Anya's speech is just, it's one of the best moments. Tara's realization that she's been there, Dawn breaking down in the school, Willow, just like focusing on something so minute as finding the correct shirt and trying to find a shirt that Joyce liked, and Xander's sort of understated rage and grief. And he thinks there's got to be someone to blame here. There's got to be someone who we've got to go and get revenge. We've got to go and find someone. Someone's got to have done this. It can't just happen. And his need to find someone to blame, and all of these interesting reactions that take place over an episode that's just so unique. The direction, the total absence of music, and it's heartbreaking, and it's just so real. I've never experienced this, but I can just tell that this is such a realistic portrayal of exactly what is being shown on screen. Forever is great. Again, a lot of good stuff. And it's nice to see that David Boreanaz came here, because it wouldn't feel right if he wasn't there for the funeral. There isn't really anyone else who I feel like has left who should have come back for this. But it's nice to see that that he does turn up in this. And Dawn and Buffy's different ways of processing their grief makes a really interesting episode. It's our first time seeing Joel Grey as Doc. Spike has a lot of really great stuff in this as well. The fact that he turns up the flowers and he hasn't put his name on it. He doesn't want credit. He doesn't want anything from Buffy. It's all about Joyce, and that he liked the lady. It's a really, really beautiful episode. Obviously, it's following up the body. It was never going to be the exact same. It has to go back to more supernatural thing at some point. But I think it still focuses in on that grief really, really, really well. Intervention. Again, great. Season 5 is just so strong. Intervention is an episode with where Buffy goes to meet the first Slayer after doing the hokey cokey in the desert with Giles. My favorite element of this episode is obviously the stuff with Spike and the Buffy bot is very funny, but it also gets very dark at the end when Spike gets captured. Also, side note, Sarah Michelle Gellar clearly loves playing the Buffy bot. She's having so much fun playing this character. And I understand why they brought her back for that very, very, very reason, because she is clearly having a ball playing this part. And when actors are enjoying what they're playing, it's more likely that you're going to enjoy it as well. But the final scene after Spike refuses to tell Gloria anything, where you really realize that Spike, he wouldn't just stab them in the back, that he's not a good man, but he has changed. And it's a big moment for that, and a really lovely scene at the end. Tough love. Good. Yeah, I enjoyed this. Tara getting her memory wiped is the big takeaway. Not her memory wiped, her getting her mind sucked and basically going insane is the big takeaway from the episode. But also the cliffhanger that leads into the final 3 episodes, which I'm very glad they've decided to deal with individually. Spiral is great. I think a really strong story. I love the chase in the Winnebago with the Knights. I know the Knights by that get slagged, but I don't care. I think they're absolutely great. There's so much fun to be had in this story as they're on the run, and it has a really devastating end, and some really brilliant character stuff between different characters as well, as they think that Giles is dying for a good chunk of it. The Weight of the World, I've come round to. I didn't really get. I was like, because the first time it feels like a distraction away from. Oh, hang on, we're in the middle of a finale. Don't go catatonic now. But it feels very natural and for where Buffy's character is going, and especially in the context of the gift and what happens at the end of the gift. It feels like a really brilliant way. The way she's envisaging death is your gift as the message. That like as sort of the Slayer power, and that she's brought death to Dawn. But I also love that Willow basically just tells her to wake up and snap out of it at the end. Maybe that's not the most helpful mental health messaging going, but I think it's really, really well filmed, really well directed, and just a really strong episode. The Gift is, in my opinion, the very best episode of Buffy or Angel. I think it is a genuine masterpiece. It's so good. Absolutely everything. I'm a bit upfront about this. I have been upfront about it in my other video. I think that season 5, as much as I like season 6 and 7, they're not awful. They're quite good. But I think this should be the end. I think this is the perfect end in the saddest way possible. I did cry watching this. Again, this is another episode that actually got me. It's so beautifully written. I think everyone has some fantastic final scenes, and the moment of Buffy turning around and looking into the when the sun shining through and starting to rise, and she runs off the edge. The music from Christoph Beck is the best in Buffy. I know I said the best episode score is Restless, but the best individual piece of music is Sacrifice, the music that plays over this scene. And seeing everyone's reaction, Giles is just so devastated and heartbroken. Willow, basically being supported by Tara because she's absolutely inconsolable. Xander and Anya. Xander's carrying Anya because she's been hurt, but he can't even process what he's seeing. He just looks so devastated, and Spike totally just breaking down and collapsing. I think this is the perfect ending, and there were so many other great moments for all the characters. I can't even go into all of it. I love the speech that Buffy gives to Dawn. The hardest thing to live in this world. The hardest thing in this world is to live in it. I love Giles killing Ben. I think it's a really great moment for him, and Xander with the wrecking ball. But I also love Xander proposing to Anya. I think this would have just been a really perfect ending for the show. I'm not resentful that they carried on. I don't think that the next 2 seasons are awful. In fact, in some ways, they have a lot of good stuff in them. But The Gift would have just been the perfect ending for the show. Bargaining. Why am I here? Link. Bargaining is great. I appreciate the decision to bring Buffy back. It was inevitable, but I'm very glad that it wasn't that there was no consequences. Buffy does bring back Angel, Buffy, and Spike from the dead, but I like that in all 3 cases there are actual consequences, and these ones feel the most real. This feels like the least cheap way to avert the death of a character, to rip her from heaven, basically. We don't actually know that yet, but to rip her from heaven and to stick her back here. There's some stuff that I don't like. I think that they started to mishandle Xander again a little bit in this story with the way he's treating Anya. But in general, I find this a really fun story with some really great emotional moments, and I think Giles leaving is beautifully handled, even if I don't like him leaving subsequently, which I'll get to. Afterlife, also great, nice little fun episode with it's not nice little fun episode. Not a clue why I said that. A sort of fun, haunted episode that is not fun, is what I was supposed to say, because Buffy is in absolute. Well, she thinks she's in hell, and it's really dark depiction of this story. I think. I don't have a lot to say about it. I just think it's a really, really good story. Flooded is not a really, really good story. I don't have a lot of love for this serial. I like Giles coming back. I think that's a nice scene played out between him and Buffy. But honestly, other than that, this just kind of feels depressing, and it goes into the areas of season 6 that I wasn't such a fan of, because Buffy's depressed, and all her friends don't seem to be able to be helping, and they're telling her that maybe you should get a job. And then, everyone slags off Anya for suggesting maybe you should charge people. I say, that's the most crazy idea I've ever heard, when it's literally what Angel does for a show. Could you not private investigate? Because that would be a good idea, and it'd be a good way to get around some of the less fun episodes of this season. Which are things like Buffy forgets the bin day, or Buffy has to get a menial job at Double Meat Palace. Things like that. Life serial is just going straight into outright bad. I did not enjoy this story whatsoever. It's, I should have mentioned in Flooded, but we meet the trio, who I really, really, really strongly dislike, made up of three very talented actors in Adam Bush Tomlink and Danny Strong, all playing their characters very, very well. But I can't enjoy it because I think that from the characters that we did know, I think it kind of ruins Jonathan. I think it's disingenuous to his character. But I never feel they're supposed to be taken as a joke. But there's one element that always particularly peeves me off, which is its depiction of them as nerds. Now, that's not in itself a problem, and I like the fact that it deals with the misogyny that is within nerd culture. But it's such a laugh at these bunch of losers. Cliched American stereotype from a high school movie of what nerds are, and that really peeves me off. It doesn't feel very respectful. It doesn't. It feels outright. It's not just telling a simple story about actual people. It feels like a slap in the face to people like me who do crazy things like rank all these episodes and really care and talk about issues, because when they're doing it, it's clearly framed as, look at these bunch of losers. They are pathetic, they are stupid, and they are so cliched. It's unbelievable. They are the nerds, and so obviously they were picked on at high school. Obviously they have deep resentment issues, and they all are obsessed about the exact same TV shows. They're all science geeks, and none of them can get girlfriends, and they're all virgins. Oh, come on. It's such an annoying, cliched stereotype. And the story life series isn't that good either. I just realized I've totally gone off topic there. But All the Way is okay. Dawn is not really done a disservice, but it's all kind of just middling in this episode. The thing that really elevates it from a not a fan status is Xander and Anya finally making the announcement that they're engaged. Man alive, they should have gotten married. Right, Once More with Feeling is easily in the top column. I mean, just easily. I think this is a sublime episode of the show. Again, I would say The Gift, The Body, and third, I put Once More with Feeling. The music is brilliant. The performances, apparently, I've seen some people sort of say this episode's weakest element is the fact that some of the cast are clearly not professional singers. But that's not what makes this episode good. What makes this episode good is the fact that they're not all professional singers. I think they all sound really, really good. People who really surprised me were Amber Benson. Obviously, I knew about Anthony Head already. But Amber Benson, James Masters, and I think Emma Caulfield's really good as well. And people like Nicholas Brendan, who, I just, for some reason, just would never have thought of singing. And I think this is a really strong episode that does a lot of good things with all of the characters. It's integral to all of the arcs. It's funny, it's vibrant, it's colourful. There's a lot of good stuff going on here. I think it's easily one of the greatest episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah, and Tabula Rasa as its follow-up, I would also put in the best of the best column. Although I can't find my mouse right now. So there we go. It's all good. Let's just make an online video. It doesn't matter that I can't use technology at all. Tabula Rasa is brilliant. Really great story. Perfectly balances the drama and the darkness, which is what I think Buffy should be. And when it's at its best, it's balancing those two things perfectly. This episode is hilarious, and at the end, it's heartbreaking. And the final scene to Goodbye to You with Tara leaving Willow and Giles leaving, I think correctly, but actually I don't think correctly. I think he should have, in theory, he left because Anthony Head left. I know that, but I get why he leaves, but it doesn't feel totally legitimate. He could have just been like, right, Buffy, you can go and you have to do things for yourself. I'll still stay here, but you have to do things for yourself. In reality, he leaves in order to force her to do things for herself. I think it's a good ending. Obviously, it's not the actual ending because we still get more Giles, particularly in season 7. That's a good story. I really enjoy the actual plot. I love the loan shark. He's very fun. And all of the jokes land. It's just a very, very funny episode. Honestly, episodes with magic which make people act in a way that's different to usual, whether that's Fear itself, Ban Candy, Halloween, Tabula Rasa, Once More Feeling, any of those plots, they're going to be great. It's the one of my favorite types of Buffy episodes is episodes where people act out of character because of a spell or whatever. Something Blue also goes into that column. Smashed and Wrecked. Okay, this is when my season 6 enjoyment kind of drops off the radar a little bit. I think the Willow addiction storyline is fine, but I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's particularly well handled. And it isn't fun to watch. There's nothing fun or enjoyable in the watching of this episode. Also, Buffy and Spike in this episode finally get together, which I know was a long time coming for some people. But it's just disturbing to me. Like, he goes there to beat her up and tell her that she's worthless and useless, and they end up having sex. That is the example of them. And I know that's the point. You're not supposed to think it's romantic, but the fact that some people do is what I'm getting at. Smash and Wrecked is a weird two-parter. I think it has some good stuff in it. I really enjoy Tara's scenes with Dawn. But it's kind of just horrible to watch Willow doing this to herself. It's at this point that I start to just live for the Xander and Anya scenes, because they're just having a nice life at this point, whereas everyone else is in absolute turmoil, which is the way season 6 should have remained. We didn't need Xander and Anya drama on top of everyone else's drama. Gone is okay. It's got some fun little moments, but the plot kind of feels about 4 years out of date in terms of, like, this feels like something could have done in season 2 and everyone had a blast. It allows Buffy to have some fun, kind of screw with Spike. Actually, it is screw Spike. I don't mean screw with the woman who had come to give her a sort of the social worker. That's it. The person who'd come to evaluate her parenting skills. This is just a run of episodes that I don't really love that much. It's quite difficult to get through. Double Mate Palace is the worst episode of the show. Just so boring. Really, really boring. And it's the element of, I understand, I actually like superheroes having money issues, superheroes being like us. But on Buffy, it didn't work for me. I don't know why, but it just didn't. I didn't get behind it. The Buffy having a menial job and having a depressing life thing. And just the way that the awkward humor and the awkward way that this episode plays out and the actual villain of the piece, none of that is good. I actually don't think there's really, again, probably I enjoy the Anya and Xander stuff, but at this point, everyone else is so depressed that it isn't that fun to watch. Sometimes, like, I'm looking up and I'm seeing other episodes where maybe the plot wasn't particularly amazing, but everyone having fun means I have fun. But if the plot is this bad and everyone is depressed, there is nothing for me. Absolutely nothing. Dead Things. Good? Yeah, I'll go good. I think this one is... No, decent. Decent, yeah, not good. Sorry, I was reading the wrong column. Decent. This one's fine. But I do actually know... No, I do have issues with it. I don't like the way that certain elements are handled in regards to... I feel like the whole setting up Buffy to think that she's killed someone. I don't know, it just feels like a weird plot. Like, I understand what's going on with Warren, but what's going on with everyone else, I don't find particularly interesting. I think this one is good, but it's not anything better than just okay. It's sort of just there, and it's an enjoyable enough watch, but it's nothing particularly special at all. Not a fan of Older and Far Away. It's a weird one. I think the actual idea behind it is not terrible. I like Halfrek. I think she's quite fun. And it's time that someone... Dawn is totally valid in a lot of her problems. But there's this weird thing where they try and tie up... They give this Dawn-centric episode where everyone realizes how much pain Dawn is actually in. And I think that was enough for me. The episode wasn't good, but everyone realized where Dawn was at, and that was nice. But then next week, everyone treats Dawn exactly the flipping same as they did last week. So it kind of was absolutely no value other than to learn that Dawn was a kleptomaniac, which we could have learned without having to learn that her pain was so severe that a flipping vengeance demon was summoned. It's really strange. As You Were is good. I actually like As You Were. It's one of my favorites of season 6. I don't know why, but Riley coming back and having this like great life almost gives Buffy's storyline an extra level of, well, depression, really, which in fairness is not really something I like in general, but I think it plays out really well in this episode. And I like the fact that they made Riley's wife, Sam, really, really likable. And they could have easily gone down at the totally opposite route, but making her likable makes it difficult for the people to really dislike her the way it should. I feel like this episode is slagged off people who hate Riley, and they don't, or people who love Spike, because Spike is revealed to be the person who's behind everything in this episode. He's the villain, really, for the first time in a long time. But I think Spike is still not a good man. He's not a good person. He doesn't have a soul. And it's all this is totally valid and actually really well done. I'm going to vent in a minute. I cried at a few episodes of this. I cried at Tara's death. I cried at Anya's death. I cried at Joyce's death, and I cried at Buffy's death. But I was always small crying, or just like sometimes even just cutting onions type crying. I bawled my eyes out at Hell's Bells. Oh man, and I want to put it in decent. I want to say what Hell's, yeah, I'll put it in decent. What Hell's Bells does is it does a storyline well, but I don't like the story that it's telling. I think if this episode had done pretty much everything exactly the same, but Xander confided in Willow at the end, and Willow basically told him to he basically just told him to buck up his ideas and that he is nothing like his father and he will not be anything like his father. And then he'd walk down the aisle. This would be one of my favorites ever. It does what the storyline it's trying to tell, it does really well. It does Xander's doubts, it plays into them, and it makes him sympathetic even though he's doing a terrible thing by leaving Anya at the altar. But man alive, do I not like that story. And it's done really, really well, and it makes me really upset. The dialogue is also well done. The heartbreak is really real for me this time, because unlike when other couples are split up, if I don't really care that Buffy and Riley and Buffy and Angel and Buffy and Spike, basically romances involving Buffy, have ended. But this, I was seriously invested in Xander and Anya. They were my favorites. And this really breaks my heart when she says, I'm just so tired of crying. Honestly, I was bawling my eyes out. It was so well done, but I don't like the story. Not just because it gives me something that I don't like, but I think the messaging is kind of irresponsible as well. I understand. I think they should have definitely told the story of Xander, this guy whose father was abusive, struggling to deal with with having to be married and his fears that he'll become like his father. But having him give into those fears and then just not get married as a result feels weird messaging wise. I'm sure some people are going to disagree with that, but whatever. Normal Again is great. The best episode of Buffy in a while. I enjoy it quite a lot. It has a lot of good stuff in it. And the reason it's not higher on the list, actually, I don't like the idea that this isn't real. But I don't like the very ending, which kind of suggests that, but maybe it's not real. Maybe this is all in the head, because it's absolutely flipping not. I have no doubt whatsoever in saying 100% that in the Buffyverse is not taking place inside Buffy Summers' head. The only thing I don't like is the very ending, which suggests that it might be. I think this is a really strong episode. Gives a lot of character stuff, a lot of good character stuff between people, and Tara is brilliant in it. Speaking of brilliant Tara stuff, Entropy is a good episode. It's perfectly fine. I really enjoy Tara and Willem getting back together at the end. Xander and Spike having a fight is great. Sort of Anya and Spike going to each other for solace. Everyone discovering about Buffy and Spike and what's been going on behind it's basically just a series of revelations, but it's played well. But I do like, my issue with season 6 in general is that they try to have this thing where life is this roller coaster of ups and downs. The thing is with season 6 is there's no ups. It's all downs. Every single week just feels like misery parade getting battered over the head with. But Entropy at the very end, after being depressing for most of it, allows a moment, a brief but lovely moment of just actual happiness. And it's like, oh, this is what it feels like to not be incredibly depressed, because I forgot all about that, because I haven't been happy since, I don't know, Tabula Rasa, maybe? You know, until everything went downhill at the end of that. And it's not like this series hasn't been good, because there's been better episodes than Entropy along the way, but it's just nice to feel happy again. Before Seeing Red practically rips your heart out. Seeing Red is a really strong episode. I think it's got some of the best stuff with, actually, in regards to the trio, with Warren totally going over the edge. Although some of the humor with those guys is still played way too hard, way too heavy. But I think I actually agree with the decision that the producer made to have Spike try and rape Buffy. I think it's traumatic to watch. Apparently James Masters needed therapy, and that he could never, he had it written into his contract that he never had to do this sort of scene again. And I get that from his perspective, but I think it's an important story to tell. And it's the sort of moment that was required for Spike to really reassess where he was at in his character arc, and have to go off and get a soul at the end of it. And actually, I think what is nice is Xander was right about Spike all along. I think there was a sense that, oh, Spike was good, and people let their guard down around him, and people have been doing that for like 2 seasons at this point. But in this very episode, Xander says, you know, when Buffy says, you know, you've made mistakes or whatever, and he goes, yes, but wiping out half of Europe wasn't one of them. Yes, I fought alongside with him all summer, but I never forgot what he was. And the thing is, Spike isn't a good man. If Spike didn't have the chip in his head, he would still be ripping people's necks out on a regular basis. And he needed something. And he had to hurt Buffy, because that's the only person he really cared about enough to really change anything. And obviously the final gut punch in this episode is Warren shooting Tara. It's heartbreaking, and it's so shocking and out of nowhere. And it gives us a really, really strong finale, in my opinion. The Dark Willow saga, I'll put in incredible. Yeah, I think I will. All the Buffy finales are in the top 2 tiers. There's no 2 ways about that for me. I think the show really always knocks it out of the park in that final episode. And in this case is kind of the case again. I think Grave might be in the best of the best column, but tied to the other 2, which they kind of tread water a little bit more. But the final episode is just perfect. It's just genuinely amazing. There's so much great character stuff done with everyone. The depression, malaise of depression that's hit over everyone over the course of the series finally feels earned and relevant, like it's actually gone somewhere. It's a brilliant storyline for Willow. And Alison Allen plays it really, really well. And I love the Yellow Crayon speech. I love Anthony Head turning up, and all those fantastic moments between them, when him and Buffy just laughing their heads off, and when Anya says, I'm blonde too, to get a hug. Little things like that. It's just such a brilliant finale and a brilliant way to end. And I think this is, you know, we're what, 122 episodes in, I think. Maths is a bit wonky, but I think that's correct. And it feels very earned to have Willow and Xander have that final speech on the by the temple, because as much as, you know, I love Xander and Anya, and over on Angel, I love Fred Wesley, and I love Tara and Willow. There are 2 most important relationships on Buffy are not romantic. They're Giles and Buffy's father-daughter relationship, and the friendship between Willow and Xander. And 122 episodes in, this doesn't feel cliched or, you know, cheap or cheesy or contrived. It feels very, very earned, that he basically does stop her by telling her that he loves her and that he forgives her. And that doesn't feel cheap or cheesy, because we care, we love these characters, we know enough about these characters to really warrant it, I think. Okay. Season 7, we are finally making progress after about 2 hours. Blimey, this is I said to myself I wouldn't speak for too long about each episode, but evidently I didn't make that resolution well enough. Lessons is decent. I feel like season 7 will be the briefest of all the seasons because that's the one I've got the least strong opinions about. I think season 7 is probably the weakest season for that very reason. Lessons is fine. Nice to meet Principal Wood. Nice to see Willow and Giles in England. Nice to be back in the high school. And Dawn is at her very best in season 7, and she's great all the way throughout. There's not really much else to say about that. Beneath You is okay. Honestly, it could be a not a fan. The worm plot is not great, but there is a phenomenal scene at the end of this episode between Spike and Buffy, and the acting from James Masters is incredible. And that scene at the end, he leans on the crucifix and you see the smoke rising. It's just impeccable. Same time, same place is good. I really enjoy this one. I think Gnarl is a really creepy villain, really well realized. One of the villains that feels most genuinely threatening. Again, it's a magic episode of Scream of Things. I think the way it's shot and the way that the information is presented to us, the way we see Spike having this conversation with Willow, and then you hear him having a conversation with Buffy, but you can't see Buffy, and you do the exact same scene, but from Buffy's perspective, it's really, really well done. Everyone's on top form in this episode. It's a very good story. Help is great. I really like, is it Azura Sky? Is that her name? She plays the role really well. It's a great sort of metaphor for Buffy learning that she can't help everyone in her new role as counselor because she wants to meet someone whose fate is entirely inevitable. There's some really good stuff in this story, some funny moments, but also some really devastating and heartbreaking ones. And again, Dawn is an absolute gem in this story. Selfless, I'll put again in the great column. I really enjoy this one. I love the return to the musical number. I think the Anya stuff is great. I love all the flashbacks. Everyone's clearly having a ball. Apparently, they actually learned the Swedish correctly for this scene. They were just going to do it in English and dub it badly in Swedish, like as a joke. But apparently they actually learned the Swedish so well that they kept it in. My only reservation about this story, other than the fact that to me an Anya episode should be a lot more fun, is that I think the character of Buffy comes off really badly because she basically decides that, okay, as soon as she hears what Anya's done, she's like, well, she has to kill her. And then there's this one line of dialogue that when Xander gets upset, she goes, this is hard for me too. I'm like, well, I don't really care. With the greatest respect, I know you've always been a tiny bit self-involved. That comes with being the protagonist, I suppose. You always got to talk about how you feel. But man alive, do I not care how Buffy feels about killing Anya. I care about how Xander feels. I don't think Xander should just get over it because she's talking about murdering actually kind of murdering the woman he loves. And I think she comes off so badly from this episode. That one bit of dialogue that makes her feel like her killing the woman who Xander loves is about her and not about Xander or about Anya, who's her friend. And the fact is, she says, well, I made this decision about Angel. Those two circumstances are totally different. I mean, you only killed Angel at the very moment where the only two choices were kill Angel or Angel dies along with absolutely every other single human being on the planet. They were the two options when she decided to actually kill Angel, all because she showed mercy to Angel even after he'd killed Jenny's uncle, even after he'd done that because she couldn't physically do it. And then she sort of gets weirded out by the fact that Xander is trying to stop this. I feel that's weird. I think Xander is totally right. Xander is also, again, he's really good in season 7. What have we got here? Him. Him's good. I have a lot of fun. This is one of the last really fun stories. I think season 7 lost the fun in a lot of ways. But this episode, everyone is clearly just having having a laugh. Everyone is enjoying themselves a lot. I really like the way it's directed, the way it's shot. The jokes are funny and they land. It's kind of a retread of Bewitched, Bothered, Bewildered. But because everyone's older now, I don't know why, but it feels very different to that episode. And the way that entire episode was framed and shot and done. Blimey. Conversations with Dead People is probably the best story in season 9. It's season 9? What the fuck am I on about? And probably the best story in season 7. I think it's phenomenally written. I think it's Joss Whedon said it's his favorite episode of this season. I saw an article where he picked out one episode of each season to say what was his favorite episodes, and he said Prophecy Girl, Becoming, The Wish, Hush, The Body, Once More Feeling, and Conversations with Dead People. And Conversations with Dead People is just a really, really brilliant script. I kind of wish Xander was in it, purely for the reason that I think that it's the only episode he's not in, and I feel like he should have been in every single episode. But the guy who they wanted to get back, wanted to get Jesse from the original episode back, but he wasn't there. We get Kirsten Sutherland back as Joyce. We get Asura Sky as sort of as a person speaking for Tara, which seems weird, but they just couldn't get Amber Benson back for it. And then there's also this psychology lesson that Buffy gets with the guy who she went to school with. It's just a really strong, really well written episode that I really very much enjoy. Sleeper. There's gonna be a lot of stuff in decent now. Sleeper's fine, and I feel like I should mention, Never Leave Me and Bring on the Light in the same breath. Sleeper is Spike with the trigger. I wasn't overly invested in the storyline, but everyone is putting in good performances that makes it into the decent column. Same with Never Leave Me and Bring on the Night. My issues with Bring on the Night is the P word is introduced, potentials. I don't like the potentials as a very concept, as a very idea. I think they bring in so many questions into the lore. I'm not a lore heavy person, but it does bring in so many questions as to what is going on with the lore and things like that. But it's fine. I don't have major issues with either of these stories. I think Bring on the Night is. I probably would not put it in the decent column. I maybe would put it in the okay column. But Never Leave Me is in the decent, so I'll chuck it down there. I don't like the potentials in general, and I'll bring that up more. Showtime and potential. They should not be on the same. They should not. That's not a two-parter. That is not fair. Right. Showtime is not a fan. I do not like that episode. But I think potential is really good. So I'm going to chuck it in decent. Showtime is annoying. It introduces Rona, who's the worst of the constantly moaning potentials. And it's basically potentials learning a lesson, which would be fine if they learnt the lesson that they had. This was Buffy proving her leadership. But then she has to prove her leadership again and again and again and again, and they continue to question every single decision she ever makes. And it's really, really annoying. Potential is the best episode about the potentials. It's a great Dawn episode. I love the final speech between her and Xander. It's probably my favorite scene in all of season 7. I think it's magnificently well written and perfectly acted by both Michelle Trachtenberg and Nicholas Brendon. And I love the stuff that's done with the potentials in this episode. Even though I don't like the potentials as a very concept idea, it doesn't mean every episode of them is going to be bad in of itself. And I enjoy them kind of getting this lesson from Spike and Buffy, and they meet Clem, and they go to a bar, and it's just really nice. It's a really good episode. One of my favorites from season 7, without question. What's this? It looks like storytelling. The Killer and Me. Okay. I write bad. There are 3 plots going on in The Killer and Me. Actually, no, I'm going to put it not fan. I think there are three plots going on in The Killer and Me, and none of them are particularly compelling. It's a Willow and Kennedy romance story, which no one wants because no one likes that romance, and it's about Willow's guilt. That's the only thing I'll give it to you, because give it to this episode that they actually handle well as the Willow guilt element. But her suddenly getting Warren's face is weird, and it's the first of a lot of filler episodes that take place in Buffy's house. It kind of just feels like we're not progressing at all with this story arc, and it feels like we are dragging it out until we reach the finale. But there's also a boring B plot and a boring C plot. The boring B plot is so boring, I can't remember what it is, but it was whatever Buffy and Spike are up to in this episode. Oh, I know it is. They go to the initiative, and no one really cares. Spike gets his chip out, fine, but it's not really that interesting. And the C plot is, oh no, Giles might be the first. No, we know Giles is not going to be the first. It's the most obvious red herring I have ever seen. So, yeah, I don't have much love for this episode. I think Adam Bush plays it really, really well, and Alison Hannigan also puts in a really good performance. But this is the most skippable episode of Buffy, maybe ever. Like, nothing would change if you didn't see this, other than the fact that Kennedy and Willow get together. First date is good. I like this one. And more specifically, I like the elements with Spike and Buffy and Principal Wood and that first date. On the other hand of that, the weaker aspect of the episode is Xander going on a date with a girl who obviously turns out to be a demon who's trying to sacrifice him, because obviously it's Xander, that's what happens. It's good. I like this one. I like the Nicky Wood revelation and the fact that he is this child of a Slayer. It gives him this new perspective. Although, does Principal Wood have an Oedipus complex? Because, you know, his mum is a Slayer, you know, the one and only. And, you know, he first tries to get with Buffy and then later gets with Faith. Just saying, that's a bit weird. Get it done is okay. Yeah, more potential stuff for the potentials, just doubting Buffy every step of the fucking way. Buffy gets taken off to learn lots of lore about how Slayers were created and stuff, which is kind of relevant by the finale, but honestly, this whole episode is more kind of dragging the story out a little bit too much for my liking. I also believe this is the episode where Buffy gives a speech around a girl who commits suicide and says that she was an idiot for giving into fear, which is, again, strange messaging. Like, in context, maybe that works, but all TV is portraying a message, and it's a really visceral scene when the girl, Chloe, kills herself, and you can actually see her hung from the ceiling with a bedsheet using as a rope. And it just feels like kind of downplaying that a little bit. Storyteller is good. Again, you know, just like with him, it's just nice to have fun episodes in this season, because this season can just feel like we're kind of dragging the story arc out a little bit. This is a fun, quirky concept. Everyone is involved is clearly having an absolute ball playing this, particularly Tom Lenk, who I don't really like Andrew that much. I think I enjoy him a lot more in Angel season 5 when he comes back for a couple of appearances. It's like, hey, this guy. But at this point, Storyteller is the episode that pretty much single-handedly makes him a likable character. Because before that, he was the guy who was involved in that plan that got Tara killed. And I was not forgiving of that just because he said some funny jokes. This is an episode which is both serious because it makes him lead up to his grief and gives a lot of interesting stuff about the Hellmouth and the Hellmouth starting to open. But it's also very funny and filmed and shot and just plays out in a very interesting manner. Okay, my battery is dying. Okay, 33 minutes. Right, let's move. Lies My Parents Told Me is good. Again, I think, actually, I might put this in great. I think this is a really strong episode. I think it's got some really good stuff going for it. Giles sort of distracting Buffy while he has Spike taken out. The whole element of Spike's trigger with those flashbacks and also the flashbacks to Principal Wood. It's a very important episode for a lot of different characters. I really enjoy it. I need to speed up. Next is Dirty Girls, also in the good column, possibly the only good episode with Nathan Fillion in it. Honestly, this end of season 7 drags its feet a lot. I think Nathan Fillion as Caleb is fine. He's not particularly amazing, but there's some really good stuff in this episode. The return of Faith is great after she'd been on Angel, and a lot of her arc. It felt weird because normally I would watch Buffy and Angel and watch them like simultaneously, but this time I just watched Buffy and then I'm going to go watch Angel. I'm starting tomorrow, hopefully. But it just felt a little bit weird. I felt like I was missing a huge chunk of the Faith arc because most of it takes place on Angel. She comes back. She's great. There's a lot of really good interactions between people, and the shock at the end when Sandy gets eye gouged out. Man alive! That was one of the defining Buffy memories for me. And at a point in the series where I was kind of just like tuning in, just like, yeah, this is fine. Every week, just like, this is a big moment of, you know, I was not sitting comfortably anymore. To set up for some episodes that I really don't like. Outright bad. Empty Places. Touched. Empty Places is a fine episode that in the last 5 minutes infuriates the life out of me, as we have the intervention from hell when everyone is written incredibly out of character to make Buffy seem better. Even though Personally, Buffy is the one in the wrong. She's being reckless and she's gambling people's lives away. But the show clearly wants you to think that Buffy is the one in the right, and it kind of martyrs her by having all of her friends be unnecessarily harsh and come across as jerks, like they're totally ungrateful for everything she does for them. And it really hacks me off. And I don't buy it. I don't let it even touch or tarnish any of the reputations of my other characters. Because I've seen writers use this trick before. You have other characters outside of your protagonist act badly so that when your protagonist forgives them, they look like a total martyr and they look so much better. I hate it. You're making one character look better by sabotaging other characters. And that carries on into Touched, which is just this is Snoresville before the finale. Everyone hangs around and has sex for an episode. That is basically the plot of Touched. The only reason it isn't the worst episode in all of Buffy is because at least at the end, it finally gets going in the last 5 minutes. But the first 40 minutes of this, nothing happens other than people sit about. Oh, that's it. And it feels totally unnatural. Kennedy, like Willow wanted to have an intervention with Buffy, but Kennedy was the one who stood up and said, all right, let's vote her out. And then we just cut to Kennedy and Willow just being all lovey-dovey and romancing. And Willow is not peeved off. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so much of the stuff in this episode doesn't make any sense. I did not enjoy Touched at all. End of Days. Oh, blimey, I'm really losing my voice now. End of Days is good. I like End of Days. It's not anything spectacular. It's not sublime. It's not, reinventing the wheel. It's just good. And I think that's possibly incredibly, underappreciated. It's a second final episode, penultimate story in this 144 episode saga. And it doesn't do an awful lot in that runtime. But after the last 2 episodes, it finally feels like, yes, we're finally getting going and making momentum. Dave Boreanaz is in this. He's, it's a really nice moment to turn up. There's actually some good Spike and Buffy stuff that I'm not just like, oh, I'm bored. It's actually some good Spike and Buffy stuff. Everyone has interesting interactions with some good character moments all the way throughout. The bit with Dawn just outright not having Buffy's crap and just zapping Xander when he tries to drive her away is a really favourite part for me. End of Days is fine. Yeah, I enjoy it. And Chosen, for the most part, I think could have been up with the very best episodes of this series. Of the series being Buffy. It's up with the very best episodes of Buffy. I have no doubt of that. So there, I'll say the one thing that peeved me off in Chosen, the actual everyone becomes a Slayer thing seems a bit on the nose, but I'm prepared to overlook that. The one thing I will not overlook, and the one thing that's keeping this episode here from being in this, probably, or maybe, actually, I think it probably could have been, is Anya's death. Why does nobody care? I was sick of I didn't realize how sick I was of the character dies suddenly thing. This was just the worst. Because this show wants to have a happy ending. It clearly wants to have a happy ending. So no one, not even Xander, seems to particularly care that their friend is dead. So she dies in order to be shocking and just feel like the battle's had consequences. And I was crying because she's my favorite character. And obviously I'm not a person that gets peeved off when their favorite characters get killed on Angel. All 3 of my favorite characters get killed in the last season, and I love all of them. I love all of their deaths. I think it's brilliant. I think the episodes are all brilliant that happens in, and all of their deaths are brilliantly played out. This is just not caring. This is just killing off a character for pure shock value in order to raise the stakes in the finale. But because we have to have a happy ending, Xander says, that's my girl. I start crying even more. But then he just walks over the others and starts making jokes about Starbucks. I'm not there for that. I was not buying the happy ending because I was weeping. And I feel like, and I know Emma Caulfield agrees with that opinion. She thinks that she really doesn't like how their character was killed off. And I concur. I think that is the only real gripe I have with this episode is that they should not, under any circumstances, have killed her off of that, which is a real shame because for the most part, this is a really strong, really great looking episode with some really good stuff between everyone. Also, Spike dies, but he doesn't really die. But it does piss me off a bit more because he gets the final speech, he gets the final words, he gets the hero's death. When his is the death, it doesn't matter because it's not permanent, and Anya just dies for nothing. But I do like that Spike is the one who saves everyone at the end. It's not really a Deus Ex Machina. It's actually a really well thought out, because it's maybe not a logical conclusion, but it's an emotional conclusion. And the potentials are actually all really good. I love the fight sequences that everyone getting Slayer powers allows. I think the whole episode looks great. There's some brilliant callbacks. The Earth is definitely doomed. And yeah, there's just some really good stuff sprinkled all throughout this. So I think it's a really strong ending for the whole series. And I feel like I got negative towards the end of this video. But like, just look at the how many of these episodes. It's best of the best. Incredible television. Great. I love this show. I think this show is brilliant. And there's very little in these bottom columns that only, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14 out of 144 episodes that I actually don't like. I think that's incredibly impressive. I think this show is incredibly consistent. I think particularly from seasons 2 to 5, it's just one of the best runs of any TV series I've ever watched. So strong. I hadn't even seen the show before this year. I've now seen it 3 times. There is a reason for that. And the reason is these characters are so good. These storylines are so good. And I just enjoyed watching this so much. And if you're still stuck around to this point in the video, which frankly I sincerely doubt, but if you have, thank you very much for watching the most ridiculously long video I have ever made. 2.5 hours. Wow. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. What a show. What a show. Brilliant.